The rest are joining us now.
Okay.
Oh, what's going on?
I don't know what's going on.
Well, I don't seem to have pictures of everybody. Oh, there we go. That's better.
Hello, Hope. Can you hear me?
I
Hey,
can.
Sue Ellen.
You're good. Hello.
Hey. Hey, Allison.
Hi there.
Hi, everybody.
Hey.
So Maureen's NIC, eh?
Yes, I think the only one we're waiting for at this moment
Is the new
Michael
boss?
just got,
is Liam.
I hope he's not having some
yeah.
difficulties.
uh-oh.
No, we're missing Maureen too, aren't we?
No,
she's
I think
there.
She,
I
There
she
saw
she
her
is.
come in.
she just joined. Here he comes.
So who is Lloyd James versus Jordan Rogers? Oh, there's Liam.
Let's see here. Gary, I think we're ready to go whenever you are.
Okay, well, I'm certainly ready to go if you think we're good to go. All right, well, welcome everybody. And this is going to be the regular council meeting, Monday, the May 25th, 2020. And I'll open the council meeting at this time. And just before we get going through the actual meeting process, I would like to make a very important announcement about a huge transition for the municipality. And today, we're going to welcome Liam Edwards as our new CAO into the Bowen municipality. And of course, Liam comes very well appointed from, he's coming in from the province. And we had just a real nice lunch today for about an hour and a half. He got to do some introductory operations into the municipality today. He's going to have a very jammed week. If you see him out there, wave to him from across the parking lot. Pretty easy to get along with. And I think he's going to be a terrific fit for Bowen Island. So on behalf of not only the municipality, but the whole community, which Liam is residing, we'd like to welcome you and to say how happy we are that you're here. On a sort of more regrettable note, I just, our interim CAO, of course, Dennis Back, will be leaving us after tonight's operation, after the closed meeting tonight. And Dennis came to us at a very tough time in the municipality back in last October. And on Kathy's leave and resignation after that. And he's been with us for the entire time. And I must just say that he's done such an incredible job of just fitting into the operation here and just really becoming a Bowen Islander in the last, 6 or 7 months. That's not quite enough, but I'd certainly consider him a Bowen Islander. And again, thank you, Dennis. It's been wonderful working with you. And again, on behalf of the municipality and the community at large, thank you for what you've given us in the last 6 or 7 months. Thank you. And we'll talk to you at the end of that closed meeting also. And
Thank you for those kind remarks, Your Worship.
Okay, no problem, Dennis. Thank you. And we'll go right in. If you're ready, Hope, the approval of the agenda, the introduction of the late items.
There are no late items this evening.
Okay.
There was a number of emails regarding the Woodfibre LNG, which is item 5.1 of the agenda.
Okay.
They were not added on table just due to mass. So they'll be included in the next agenda on June 8th for information, but all of council has received those. Okay,
thank you very much. I have those. And the recommendation is council approve the agenda and late items agenda.
Sorry, Mayor Ander, Councillor Morris has her hand up.
Oh, okay. Allison?
A couple of things. There was a late item email from Doug Ray out at Hood Point about the speed limits out there and the use of streets bylaw, which I think just came in my emails.
Yeah.
I guess before you approve the agenda, I was going to suggest that we should be deferring the, and I don't know whether we want to do it now or when we get to that item, the short-term rentals bylaw.
Okay.
And also defer the traffic and use of streets bylaw because of all the confusion with the mapping.
Okay, can we, I'd like to leave them on the agenda and we can have a discussion when we get there because I didn't hear about any confusion on the mapping and that sort of thing. I read Doug Ray's thing, but that was the only part of it.
So just to clarify the on table items, we're trying to minimize those because of I sent an email to council just trying to minimize the number of on table items the day of the meeting. So council has received them, but they're not going to be included in this official agenda package. And they'll be included in the subsequent meeting. I think Councillor Nicholson has her hand up.
Okay, Maureen.
I was wondering if you could just sort of recap what the procedures are and the timelines for members of the public who might be listening, because they have been altered.
Yes, that's right. And it is included in the agenda. So essentially to have written correspondence included in the agenda package, we must have it 4 days in advance of the meeting so that we can publish it with the revised agenda that goes out on Friday before the meeting. So anything received after this date will be included in the subsequent council agenda. So that timeline allows for council to read it in advance and for it to also be included in the formal agenda. It also is less of a administrative burden on staff to have to do it after the fact.
Thank you.
Thanks, Maureen, for that, and thank you, Hope, for that clarification.
I'll make sure that that updated information is on the website if it isn't already.
All right, so I would like to leave those two items on the agenda, and we can discuss them when we come on to them. So the recommendation is the council approve the agenda and late items not applicable for the May 25th, 2020 regular council meeting. I'll move that.
I'll second.
Okay. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right,
Okay, thank you. Public comments, Hope. How are we doing there on the list?
Good. We have 2 public comments this evening. Ed Watchman from the NERPs regarding the Collaborative Project Service Agreement. He has a quick slide, so I'm just going to screen share that if that's okay.
Perfect.
Let's find it here. There we go.
Oh, nice.
Hang on a minute. Ed, you can go ahead anytime. Let me know what slide you'd like to be on.
Certainly.
Okay, Ed, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank everybody. Thank you, Hope, Mayor Ander, and welcome, Liam, to Bowen Island. My name is Edward Watchman, and I'm here to talk very briefly about a partnership project involving the Bowen Island Community Foundation, the Bowen Island Municipality, and the Neighborhood Emergency Response Program, known to you as NERP. Throughout this COVID pandemic, NERP has gained some important insights. One critical one: there are a number of Bowen Island residents who do not have access to digital communication. No internet, no email, no social media, nothing. Many of these are neighbors who, for various reasons, might benefit from extra assistance during an emergency. We did not always have ways to reach out to them and let them know that help was available. The challenge was how to establish and maintain contact. The solution, straightforward and simple. Some NERP volunteers, especially those in Tunstall Bay and Eagle Cliff, posted notifications in heavily foot trafficked areas, mostly near mailboxes. It was primitive, it was old school, but it got the word out. The glitch in our digital communications raised the specter of a much more serious possibility. Suppose there was a major earthquake and power and internet were down for a length of time, weeks, possibly a month or so. The entire island would be in communication blackout. What would we do? New slide, Hope, please. Then the Bowen Island the Bowen Island Community Foundation announced their resiliency fund. NERP reached out and responded with a proposal to design and build up to 10 information kiosks at strategic locations across Bowen Island. In the event of a major emergency, these kiosks will play a critical role in the safety and security of our island. They will serve as communication information centers, gathering places, and our hope is much, much more. Next slide. To begin our project, we selected 5 strategic locations. They are shown here on the map. Unfortunately, 3 of them were deemed to be in riparian or water conservation zones and may require an environmental assessment. Until we sort out that issue, we are beginning with just 2. It's a start, and we're pleased to have at least 2 to begin with. Next slide, please. You've probably seen this. It was in the package with the community project service agreement, and it was our initial concept of what the kiosks might look like. Next slide. To give council a preliminary idea of what we envision in the kiosk, we fleshed out this working sketch, this working rendering. This is more in line with our design than the original generic concept that we shared with the when we began the agreement. This is to the dimensions that were in the working sketch in the previous slide. Current funding, and we call this phase 1, is for simple, for a simple but a durable structure, essentially 2 poles, a metal roof, and a notice board, much like this. However, we are building these kiosks with an eye for the future. We envision and hope for funding for phase 2, which is transforming these kiosks from being merely communication and information centers into emergency response hubs. In these, we would expect, or we would hope to have, a box containing emergency equipment such as first aid supplies, communication devices, possibly a pop-up tent, emergency manuals, etc. An AED possibly, solar panels for charging phones, and other things that would be very useful for a neighborhood in an emergency. Next slide. I want to thank council because this is our first collaborative project service agreement. And without your help, it is unlikely that this important community safety project could proceed. There will be more as we put forward new locations. And at the risk of sounding like an Oscar winner, I also want to thank the Community Foundation for their generous funding, and also the many NERP volunteers who have already pitched in and will continue to do so. And I have to say a special word for Judy Getty and Doug Nash, who in a matter of days have dived into the detail and stick handled the project to where it is today. So thank you everybody that's been involved to date, and everyone stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Edward. And that's those look really, really good. I think they're going to be quite substantial, and the sooner we can get them out there, the better. Any questions for Edward? Okay, who's that, Rob? Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Hey, thanks for that presentation, Edward. Edward, a quick question for you. There were 5 locations on that map. We're only doing 2 of them, or you're only doing 2 of them. If we dealt with those riparian issues, would you be able to put up more signs?
Yes.
More kiosks? Yeah.
Okay. Yes, the
Is that-
plan. Yes. The plan is.
Great, because
yeah, go on.
yeah, so like Mount Gardner is an interesting one. I don't know if you've been out to the site. I was out there today because I had some questions on it, but it's one of the ones that's, I guess, in a riparian zone, but it's like right next to the mailbox on a gravel outshoot, right? And there's actually an existing hiker sign there as well. So I'm wondering if we can work, if you can work with staff to see if there's any of those issues where we really do need an environmental assessment, or whether we can go without having one. That area definitely looked like it was basically gravel parking area. So
that's our hope. We actually have identified 10 sites, potential sites. We were going to look for the service agreement for 5 to get us started. We've got the 2, but we plan to do up to 10. And again, it depends on cost. Different locations will require different costs for site preparation, etc.
thanks, Ed.
Okay. David, you had a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Edward. And thanks, Gary. And thanks, Edward, for the work on this. It looks really good. My question is about its use. Like, who will be responsible for all the messages? But secondly, with any luck, emergencies hardly ever happen. And so if it's only used in emergencies, it becomes it'll start disappearing. So how do you plan to handle that to make it feel like a place that's useful, but not be, filling it with stuff that hasn't got anything to do with emergencies, but yet keeping it visible? I'm just sort of trying to figure that one out a little bit.
We have a model for that right now. It's the Eagle Cliff Neighborhood Association. They have a kiosk that's been there for years. Was one of the places where we began to post the emergency information, but we expect that neighborhoods could use this to post all sorts of information. So it would be more than just an emergency kiosk. Its primary purpose would be for an emergency. but we anticipate that it would be used for other situations. As for the emergency gear, that is for a phase 2. And there is talk about additional funding for that. That would be actually turning some of these into emergency hubs.
Okay, great. Thank you, Edward. Good answers. Thanks.
Maureen?
Thank you. Hi, Ed. I've got 2 questions. And the first one you may not be able to answer. The second one you may not be able to answer, for that matter. The first one has to do with where the Eagle Cliff kiosk fits into this. Are you aware, and maybe Jen can answer this, is that proceeding apace so that we have 3 kiosks on the horizon?
We were asked by the Community Foundation when we put in the proposal for the original grant to roll, there were several other proposals from different neighborhoods to roll these together. And the Eagle Cliff kiosk is one of those, and we will give a partial funding for the refurbishing of that.
Okay, thank you. And then the second question has to do with the potential future inclusion of solar panels. Do you have any idea what the per kiosk cost might be of including solar panels on these kiosks?
We don't know, and that would be in phase 2. Right now, our funding is only for phase 1, which is essentially 2 posts, a roof, and a bulletin board.
Right. The reason I'm asking is that annually we have a refund that comes in through the Climate Action Revenue Incentive Program, the CAREP. It's between $4,000 and $5,000 a year, and there's some unexpended funds from prior years, and there'll be another 4,500 or so that comes through this year. So there is a potential source for solar panels, and it would be a good idea to get a fix on what the per kiosk cost would be for those panels.
Can I follow up with you? Thank you.
Yeah.
That sounds very.
With me and with David.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
All right. I think I see that's it. Thank you very much, Edward. I'm looking forward to this project going forward. You put me down as a volunteer too.
Good.
All right.
I just did
thank
actually.
you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go have dinner now.
Sure. Okay. Hope.
Hang
Thank
on, we're still going to be talking about this, right, in the agenda?
Yes.
Okay, so Ed, come back for 7.1.
When is that?
It's down here for 7:15, but I don't know when we'll actually get to it.
I'll pop back at 7:15. I'm sure you won't have reached it by then.
No, we won't have.
Alrighty.
Thank
So
you.
next on the public speakers list is Anton van Walraven regarding Woodfibre LNG's certificate extension.
Great. Hello, Anton. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you very much, Gary, for giving me this opportunity to speak tonight.
Yeah.
I'm speaking on, I also would like to welcome Mr. Edwards. Welcome to Bowen Island. I'd like to speak to agenda item 5.1. Woodfibre requested an extension of its environmental assessment certificate. It's about to expire on October 26th this year. Also, I'd like to refer to our letter of May 5th to Council. We are having seen since the approval of this project that all the arguments have come by why this project should go ahead, but we also have seen the predicted effects of climate change become progressively more dangerous. And over the last 5 years, the understanding has grown that we should not be building new fossil fuel projects, which Woodfibre Energy is one of. And therefore, I'm asking on behalf of the 1,300 people who've signed the House Sound Declaration, which is a declaration in opposition of this plan here in House Sound. I'm asking you to advise the Minister and the Environmental Assessment Office not to extend the environmental certificate for the proposed Woodfibre Energy project. and possibly also to, because I've understood that the Squamish Nation has sort of partnered with Woodfibre LNG, to ask the Squamish Nation to reconsider as well their support for this project. And that's.
Thank you, Anton.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's no problem.
All right. Okay, so we're going to move on to the consent agenda. How does everybody feel about that? Is there any clarification that anybody needs on any of these items?
Councillor Morse has her hand up.
Okay, thank you.
I would like to pull 3.6.
3.6, okay.
think
All
that's
right.
bylaw.
Okay, so we'll put it into section 11, I guess. Can't see anywhere else for it to go.
Do you want to put it under section 6 bylaws, Gary, just so that Emma doesn't have to hang around too?
Oh, yeah, okay, great idea, super idea. Let's do that.
We could put it as item 6.3.
6.3 it is then, thank you. Okay, anybody else?
Sorry, is that 3.6 becoming 6.3?
Yes.
It is.
Thank you.
Yeah, correct, yeah.
Thank you, just checking.
Okay, nobody else? Okay. And the recommendation is the council approve the items as outlined in the May 25th, 2020 consent agenda as amended. Move.
I'll move it.
Second.
Thank you, Rob. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Okay, Hope, good.
Just before we get going, I just wanted to just make a quick note to remind council to use the hand up function, just so I can keep track, and it allows the mayor to keep track as well.
Does everybody have that function? I thought Rob didn't have that function.
Yeah, I think I got it.
It's under
I hope I've been using
participants,
it, eh?
yeah.
Everyone should have it.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
That
Thank
one?
you. Yep.
That's
And
it.
then yeah, perfect. Thanks so much.
Okay, good. All right, and we'll move into, where are we there? 3.6.
Put your hand down, Rob.
Okay, we'll move into staff reports. And we've got the 3.7, 3.8.
I gotta sit my hands.
That's the end of the consent agenda. We'll move into delegations. Sat Vanor. And he's the applicant at 720 Gardner Lane for the rezoning there. Hello, Sat.
Hey, Gary. Thank you. I guess, yeah, Hope, if you want to share, or I can share my screen. How do you want to do it?
Whatever you like. I have it here. And
You know what, Hope, I'll just share mine just so it's, I don't stumble
Okay.
over that one presentation, one screen or one slide that's going to be out.
Sounds
Could
good.
we also see Sat? The video is off. Is that possible?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know, how does it work with sharing the
Drop.
screen?
Just at the bottom, you should just select share screen, and then you just need to select the file that's open.
Yeah, okay. No,
Gotcha.
Oh, there we are.
Maybe.
Good.
Looking here, there, and everywhere. Okay. It says host disable participant screen sharing.
Oh, I don't know how I did that. I can share it if it's.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, I think that's a better idea. I hope you can just share it, and I'll just tell you to skip past the one that we need to skip past.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Well, hey everyone, thanks for the opportunity to speak. And you know, I hope everyone has been managing well, given all that's going on with COVID. And I really do want to thank council for the response so far. And I think we've, you know, done really well as a community. So, you know, this is a marathon and not a sprint, as we all know. So we'll see how the rest goes. But I think so good so far. So I just want to go over a few items with council regarding the application. Before we begin, though, Hope, if you want to help me, just if any council member has a question, just feel free to interrupt me, please. But Hope, if you don't mind, just kind of managing that, because I may not be able to see it.
Yep, no problem.
That'd be great. Try to make this as interactive as possible. So since council last saw the application, there have been a few things that have gone on. The application has gone through another round of committee reviews. And really the main outcome of these reviews is that the APC recommended that approximately 50% of the RR3C lot areas be conserved as natural green space, and which we have agreed to adopt as a part of the proposal. I think it's a nice, it's kind of looking forward to the conservation development principles, and I think we're in agreement with that, of course. The other thing that has happened after some delay due to COVID, we had a virtual open house on April 22nd. The Zoom platform provided an opportunity for members of the public to hear more about the proposal, ask questions. And so from that perspective, I think it went well. Council also received a significant number of letters showing support, which I'll speak to in a moment. And lastly, there have been some new findings related to the access off Buchanan Road. I won't speak to that directly myself because I actually don't know very much about it at this time. Daniel will speak to that, but I understand he's not around. So we'll see how we manage that going forward. Slide 2, thank you. So we actually received closer to 35 letters of support. At the time of doing this presentation, I wasn't sure, so I kind of lowballed it a little bit, but we're at, I think, around 35. And as we all know, we live on an island where there is a committee or a community organization for just about anyone's personal interest, which is lovely, which is what makes Broen what it is. So in that light, even though we live on the island, we can sometimes not be aware of the importance of a certain group or organization to this island. So letters of support really show that Nectar Yoga is an integral part of this community. And we are offering, what we're offering and the vision we have is welcomed by a large group of islanders. All the letters received are in agreement with what we have proposed in terms of the rezoning, park dedication, green space preservation, and the development overall. And I think that's pretty wonderful show of support by a broad range of people, people within this community. And really, we're truly grateful to each and every person who took the time to write in. Next slide.
Is that blank or is it just me?
It's blank on my screen too. It shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Maybe we go to the next one, the next one, or is it showing up blank now?
Blank. How interesting. Let me just stop sharing for just a sec and see.
Okay.
Do you have a bandwidth issue or something? Because I was seeing 25 letters of support flashing on and off.
Not sure.
It is in the agenda package. Oh, so.
Yeah, if you guys want to follow along with that.
Let me just pull that up. Hang on a minute. Sorry about that. I'm not sure why that happened. But leave it to technology. Just 1 second.
Does everybody have them available on their agenda? Is everybody looking at it or no?
I guess it's the problem is the public can't see it necessarily.
Just give me 2 seconds here.
Hope, could you also remind members of the public that they should not be commenting in group chat?
Yes, I can do that. I didn't realize that because I had the share screen up, but I will do that. Or please don't do that, folks that are tuning in. Okay, let me just get back to where we were here. Okay, how's that look?
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you. So in addition to the letters received by council, a wonderful friend of ours decided to reach out to the wider Bowen community through an online petition to see what kind of support, or truly just as important, lack of support there is for our proposal. Due to the COVID situation, obviously we couldn't set up a table in the Cove like maybe some of the other proposals had done in the past. And so, like most things lately, everything kind of went online. And so that's kind of how this petition was, I guess, born, if you will. The petition was open for a little more than 2 days to limit the reach to Bowen Islanders. And it was shared on several of the Bowen Island Facebook pages. So, the results really truly speak for themselves. It was signed by over 300 people who were in agreement with the petition. And there was roughly another 30 Bowen Island citizens, apart from the folks that had sent in a written letter that commented. And this is, really a big show of support for an island of approximately 3,700 people. The main takeaway from the letters and the petition is that the community feels that the retreat center, park dedication, and other green space preservation is more than generous for development of this kind and size. It is worth mentioning, that council did not really receive a letter of oppose to either the petition or a proposal. And as we all know, putting something out there on the internet, and especially Facebook, it can go both ways. It's not, you don't really, the intention with which you put it out with isn't necessarily how someone might receive it. And so, the fact that we didn't get any opposition is just almost as important as the support that was shown. And I think that that's an important note to make. In particular on the petition side, because it was circulated quite widely on Facebook, on the Bowen pages. And so, as you guys know, if someone had a huge issue with it, you guys would have heard about it by, several times over again by now. Next slide, please.
You write that.
And sorry, so Hope, this is the one I'll get you to come to at the very end. Sorry to confusing. Perfect, thank you. One of the other things I want to do is just take a quick moment to give you kind of council an overview or a broad overview of the retreat center market within British Columbia, but also kind of this applies really broadly as well. There tends to be a sense with rezoning applications that there's some kind of financial windfall for the applicant. This may be true for typical subdivision type developments that are really for profit only. But the reality is that retreat centers are not an easy way to make money. There are far better ways to invest your money, and hence why there have been very few retreat zonings on Bowen Island to date. They require a significant amount of capital, especially in this part of the world. As you all intimately are aware of, the challenges that the elderly and the young people are facing currently with housing affordability is immense, right? Land and construction costs are amongst the highest globally. And so if people are willing to travel for a retreat, which is typically the case, why not choose somewhere less expensive to build? And that's the reality when it comes to retreat centers globally, really. And so Bowen, our OCP calls for it. We'll have a difficult time. We, as collectively as a community, will have a difficult time attracting the significant investment that is required for a retreat center. And so the space is generally dominated by three categories. There's a fourth that I'll speak to that we fall under, but there's three generally. And there's one is the corporate sort of for-profit. These are the exclusive, very expensive retreats and lodges that are often located in unique and isolated areas. They're fly-in typically, where their guests are willing to pay a premium for the privacy. These tend to be little to no community aspect or benefit due to the high-end product that they're offering. They usually fly in most of their staff, or bring in their staff if it's like a chef from France or whatever. There's not really a community element to that. The second group that is dominated, or that retreat centers are typically dominated by, is religious and community organizations. They build a retreat facility to support gatherings and events related to that particular organization. The facility itself typically operates at a loss. So the organization subsidizes the operation of the facility to support it, right? I don't know the intricate details of Rivendell, and by no means am I speaking ill of Rivendell. It's a beautiful organization, beautiful facility, but I suspect that that's the case with Rivendell as well. I know how much they charge. That facility is amazing. And so for certainly there's probably some type of subsidizing going on, which is there's nothing wrong with that at all. And then the third group is non-for-profit. This is more like a hollyhock, which many of you may have heard of. So it's typically run by a board of directors and operate based on a shared common purpose. And profit is definitely usually not that shared common purpose. So it's not built to be highly profitable. And so for that reason, it often requires some cash injection during challenging years. And this year might be one of those. So then there's a fourth space, which is, privately owned retreats, kind of like Xenia. And this is kind of the space that we would hopefully operate in as Nectar Yoga. And so those of you that lived in Bowen long enough, the challenges Xenia has faced. Angeline has done a wonderful, amazing job creating a beautiful space, and she is doing amazing work in this world, but it has come with significant challenges. And times in the past, it has required a bit of community support. This hasn't been a solo gig, so to speak. Nectar, like I said, Nectar Yoga would be operating in a challenging market environment, and we are not trying to be sort of that high-end exclusive space. So, any sense that approval of this application would be some financial windfall for us is simply not true. This project is of purpose, of volition, and of longevity. Financial aspect is certainly not the sole aspect of it. Next slide, Hope. Thank you. Also, just kind of to recalibrate this a little bit, we're really fortunate, to be honest, to be on an island where we don't have copious amounts of developments and rezonings. Now, I know, all of us have our own views on this, but in comparison to, other regions around us, we typically will have a little bit lower level of development, and that's a good thing, obviously. But so, it's not like council sees so many applications and has a prescribed method to follow, and there's sort of a flow to it. So I just want to remind council what this rezoning is really about. A more typical rezoning application is essentially asking for more density, either through building lots or building units, or lots, for the sole purpose of selling for a profit. And in return, the developer gives certain amenities to the community. Our rezoning is not asking for more density in terms of sellable lots or units for the sole purpose of selling for a profit. The ask is not, can we have 2 residential lots, whatever, which I feel like has gotten a lot of the attention, especially with council. We can currently, without rezoning, subdivide into 3 lots. So that's not really the ask. What the application is about is rezoning a portion of the property to be able to operate a retreat center on Bowen Island. In exchange for that, we are willing to provide park dedication, a significant amount of green space preservation, as well as local year-round employment, staff housing, which we all know is incredibly important to our community right now, supporting local businesses outside of the normal tourist season. We have this huge hump in the summer, and then the rest of the year our businesses suffer. And so we need to be able to attract businesses that can, really carry our economy year round. And that is something that our business can and would be able to do. I could go on, but in the interest of time, I'm going to move on. So slide 6. Oh, I'm sorry, Cope, can you go back to the one with the map? Yeah, thank you. So you guys have all seen this. I won't go through the details of this, but in essence, with all that said, we collectively have the opportunity to preserve more than 75% of the current lot area well into the future, while still fulfilling the OCP mandate for attracting health and wellness retreat centers to Bowen. I would say that this is an opportunity that the municipality should not pass on. There is a pulse happening on Bowen right now, and it is ever more palpable during the current times. There's a great and unique wave of people pouring their hearts into their dreams on this island. And we are not alone in this. There are many others on this island that are doing this. And this is a wonderful, beautiful aspect of where we are right now as a community. And the municipality needs to recognize this new energy. It is the future of Bowen Island. There's a generational and cultural shift happening on Bowen, and it cannot be stopped. So with that, I think I've taken up a lot of time, but if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer any of them. But otherwise, I say thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sat. That's a very passionate presentation, and we appreciate that. Obviously, we're going to look at it in more detail coming forward here, but does anybody have any questions for clarification? Otherwise, I'd like to move on. I don't see any hands up there, so we're going to let you go, Sat. Thank you very much again, and stay tuned.
All right. Thank you.
All right, so business arising from the minutes, 5.1, which is a Woodfibre LNG. Bonnie Brokenshire, the interim manager of the Environment, Parks Planning and Bylaw Services. Bonnie, are you there? Yeah.
Hi.
Hi, Bonnie.
Hi there. Good evening, Mayor and Council. So on May 6, 2020, BIM staff was officially informed that the EAO was seeking comments regarding a potential extension of the Woodfibre LNG environmental assessment certificate, as the project has not yet substantially started. A report about the EAO's request for review and a copy of the Woodfibre LNG EAC, that's the environmental assessment certificate extension rationale, was provided in the May 11th, 2020 council meeting agenda package. At the May 11th, 2020 meeting, council passed resolution number 20255, and the interim manager of Environment and Parks Planning Bylaw Services, as I was a member of the initial Woodfibre Technical Working Group, was directed by way of that resolution to ask the EAO for an extension so that staff and council could provide informed feedback. On May 12th, 2020, the EAO granted an extension until May 31st. And I'm just gonna scroll Down here a bit. And to provide adequate time for comment, the resolution also directed staff to bring the EAO's request back to the May 25th, 2020 meeting, tonight's meeting, so that council could provide feedback. So just, I'm hoping council had time to sift through my comments that I provided. I also included my initial comments from the technical working group from 2015. And I also have included as an attachment the proposed extension request by Woodfibre LNG. So the recommendation before council tonight is that council direct the interim manager of environment, parks planning and bylaw services to incorporate the feedback received from council at the May 25th, 2020 meeting about the Woodfibre LNG extension application and submit the extension review to the Provincial Environmental Assessment Office prior to May 31st, 2020.
All right. Is that it, Bonnie?
That's it. And I
right.
just,
Well,
it's
thank you
open.
very
I'd
much.
love to hear what council has to say, and I can incorporate comments and then submit before the 31st.
Yeah. Why weren't we invited, and was everybody else invited in the house out?
I don't
What
know
happened
why,
there?
yeah. I don't know why we weren't invited, Mayor, but the fact of the matter, there were a number of municipalities that were not aware or were not asked. Their technical working group members were not reconvened or asked to reconvene and review the certificate or the application for review for extension. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, Councillor Fast has her hand up.
I see that. Yeah, go ahead, Sue Ellen.
Okay, thank you very much, Bonnie, for this. I've been following this since the previous term of council. Let me know if I'm talking too loud because I've got my headphones on. I was really interested to read your submission, and it is technical. And the suggestions I had a bunch of suggestions that I emailed you and then discovered, oh, the letter's already written. So here's my main one that I thought you might want to put in. Marine shipping safety is obviously a big feature of yours. There's been changes over the past 5 years. Today, people on Bowen were watching, well, today and yesterday, I guess, humpback whales around Bowen for the past week. That one has a name, it's half pipe. And people on Bowen are really interested in watching these returning whales and dolphins. There's also been a, last night, 85 people at least turned up for the launch of the Bowen Marine Atlas. This is it's a big project, but it talks about the waters of Howe Sound. And as we found in the Parks Plan, public input on public interest on Bowen is high in the nearshore marine. Anyway, I won't go into all the other changes, like the whale trail sign that municipality put up at Cape Roger Curtis, or Ocean Watch that Bowen earlier this year paid our money to be part of Ocean Watch, which is part of protecting the marine environment around our island. And anyway, where I thought we could go that I didn't see strongly in your submission, and so tell me if I missed it, was about the whales, about the species. The listed killer whales are all red listed, no matter what their population is. The humpback whale that's out there now is blue listed, as are the gray whales that we sometimes see. So underwater noise, ship strike, our declaration of a climate emergency you've got in there. And the other thing about this bit about the species is that in the Trans Mountain Pipeline, the Federal Court of Appeal ruled that there was an error in the decision to exclude consideration of the environmental impact of project-related marine shipping. So I think that should be included. And I'll send you that if you want. But anyway, I can read you the rulings and things like that, but there have been ship collisions. There have been different kinds of spills. There is no real planning for an LNG spill, only for oil and other things that flow out on the surfaces. There's a whole bunch of reasons, but the main one I thought that you might incorporate, Bonnie, is that marine shipping should be thinking about the environmental impact of marine shipping on the creatures beyond the terminal in Howe Sound. So I have another motion to go with that, but I'll wait until I hear what everybody else has to say. That was my main thing to add. Thank you.
So
Okay,
Councillor-
Maureen. I'm sorry, Maureen.
Thank you. I appreciate the report, Bonnie. It's informative to be reminded of the work that was done 5 years ago and to be brought up to date. I have quite vivid memories of being talked to by Gordon Wilson in a council meeting regarding LNG and the various recommendations that came out from that. And I'm probably anticipating Councillor Fast here. I think that the recommendation that's on the books to provide feedback based on this discussion is appropriate, but I think that there's a second recommendation that's needed to cut through the noise. And that second recommendation would provide a clear statement that Council directs staff to communicate to the Environmental Assessment Office that Bowen Island Municipality does not support the Woodfibre LNG extension application. And I know that there may not be agreement on the part of all council members, but I think a blunt, direct statement of whether we support this or whether we don't support this is needed for the Environmental Assessment Office and also for all of the community members who have written to us and quite passionately spoke about how inappropriate it is to have this project go forward. I think it's also respectful to the Squamish Council, which has voted to oppose the extension to the Woodfibre LNG. And I think it also would reflect a response to, we weren't going to be consulted on this. And that worries me greatly. So I'll let the rest of council provide their feedback. And then either Sue Ellen or I, I'm sure, will be presenting a version of the motion that I just described.
All right, David.
Thank you, Gary. And Sue Ellen and Maureen have really covered all the territory that I want to mention, so I don't need to reiterate any of that, but I do support what Maureen is suggesting as a second motion, saying that we do not support the extension. So I don't need to add any more, I don't think. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. Rob?
Yeah, very similar to David. I think it's all been said, and the community voice against the extension, I think, was very clear. I think we got over 40 letters. It was in the last day and a half, so I think there's a pretty clear message. One of the recommendations we could do is we could even just be very clear. I like what Maureen and I guess Sue Ellen and David have had to say, a very clear cut. We don't accept, we don't support the extension of the environmental certificate. And then Bonnie's report can be the reason why we're not doing that, what our concerns are. Or we can do two motions, but I would definitely support not giving them an extension on their certificate.
Okay, anybody else? Allison?
I'm just wanting to clarify. I went and looked up the Squamish Council agenda package, and I did not read the comments or report that was in there, anything in there that clearly said Squamish was opposing the extension. So I'm not sure where that's coming from. I've just sent
the Squamish Chief newspaper. It was a 4-3 vote in opposition.
Well, the agenda package that's there and says the council ratified a resolution doesn't say that. I just sent it around. It's on their website.
Happy to provide another confirmation.
As Sue Ellen, back to you.
Thank you. Yeah, Maureen has anticipated me with what could be the first part of another motion. Mine, I've sent to Hope earlier, and I just sent it around to everybody by email if you want to take a look. I was going to write, and it's not as blunt and direct, that BIM Council write to the provincial government to advise about our concerns that LNG carriers pose a significant risk to our community, surrounding ecosystem and species at risk, including whales, and that LNG carriers must not enter the waters of Howe Sound until such time as world-class regulations and policy specific to LNG cargo and shipping are in place and are enforceable, which is kind of where the whole project was promised to be at the beginning many years ago. So I'm quite happy to either go with Maureen's or to add Maureen's and ours together. Mine is just longer. So Maureen, I'm happy to go with yours.
Yeah, so just for clarity, and I guess back to Bonnie on this one, I mean, the province is concerned about the extension. And if they go past the October 6th, they're requesting a 5-year extension on their environmental assessment. This is what we're talking about today. We're not talking about whether it's a good idea or not, or everything that's going to happen. And I agree. And I looked at all the letters, and basically people are saying, no, we don't want any LNG, but it doesn't. I just asked from Bonnie's perspective, is this what the province is asking? Because we're already on record saying that we don't want the LNG. There's no question about that. And I'm a little confused than I was last time that this request from the province is about the extension on the environmental assessment. It's not about whether we're going back through this thing. We're already on file saying that we don't want this to happen. So are we just reinforcing that position, or where are we coming from here? I mean, we can reiterate again that we're not in favor of LNG and take a vote on that from council. That's fine. But is that what the province wants to know, or do they want to know whether we support a 5-year extension so they can finish up the environmental assessment? That's the question I have. And Bonnie, can you clarify any of that?
Well, the correspondence that I received from the province was for the technical working group to reconvene and look at the extension and see if there were any reasonable, rational, scientifically, legislatively based reasons why the extension should not be granted. Now, separate to that, there is a political level that if the certificate is not extended, the project is no longer. So the province does have the ability to deny the application for the extension.
Correct. Which would scuttle the project. I mean, I understand that part of it, but are we, I just want to be clear for clarification, are we from the municipality of Bowen Island say, no, we don't want them to have an extension which will scuttle it? Basically what we're saying is we want to stop the project. We're not actually telling the province that we're not in favor. The question is, are you in favor of extending it? So we can say, no, we're not in favor of extending it, and then the project will be over. But if that's what it's going to be, then we'll have to just look at this resolution. But let's not, do we have reasons for not wanting them to extend it besides the fact that we don't want it to happen? I mean, I don't think that's a political question the province is asking. I think the province is coming back to you in particular, and not and through when you're looking for council input into it. So this resolution, I think, has to be very well written. And if you want to put a resolution into the province that we don't want LNG, that's fine. And we're going to do it through, we're not in favor of extending the environmental assessment. review. So yeah, I just want to make perfectly sure that the resolution states what we want to say to the province.
Councillor
Mr. Mayor?
Fast. And
Mr. Mayor, if I can suggest that we deal with the technical resolution that's in front of us now at 5.1, and then we can see whether we want to make a political motion reinforcing the motion passed by the previous council, like the one that Maureen or I suggested. And that I think if we keep them separate. So this one is the technical submission, and that I provided some input to Bonnie about that.
Yeah, and I think as far as the technical submission is concerned, I think that's very good. I don't have a problem with Bonnie's report, and I'd be happy to sign off on that.
Then I'd like to move that council direct the interim manager of.
We got Allison. Let's just go through the list here, please. Thank you, Allison. Go ahead.
Well, I guess my question, if I can read my handwriting, what was issued back in 2015 was an environmental certificate, and they're issued for 5 years. And just like our temporary use permits, they can be renewed for a second 5 years. Our temporary use permits are 3 years. So the certificate, if substantial, the problem is they haven't got to substantial construction will not have started by the time you get to October. With a huge project, it's not unusual to have substantial construction not have started within the 5 years, especially if you're doing a lot of remediation and stuff, because often you find other things you've got to deal with, which extends everything, and you can't dig in the ground until your remediation is done. So I guess, what are the technical reasons for not extending the certificate, the 5 year, giving the 5 year extension for the certificate? And I think Bonnie has covered those off, because she said, well, they haven't got to substantial construction because, but the issues I think that Sue Ellen's raising are different things. They have nothing to do with the certificate and aren't reasons for not renewing it. So if it goes just as Bonnie's report as is, then that's one thing. But they're not asking us whether we're in support of the project or not. They're asking us whether or not we are in support for renewing or not renewing the certificate. And we would have to be able to say why the certificate should not be renewed for the reasons such as why didn't they get to substantial construction, not because we aren't in favor of LNG.
Okay, thank you, Allison. That's more or less what I was trying to say, sorry. Rob?
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Morris and Gary, you as well. I think we should be very specific. We don't support the extension of the environmental certificate. The report actually has quite a lot of good points about why not. Like 5 years, a lot has changed. There's been some new regulations around species at risk that have come in since then. So I think we have some really good points already in the report for why we don't think we should extend the certificate. And I don't think we should go into that we as a community don't support LNG versus this, which I don't support this industry at all. But I think we should stick very specifically to what the province is asking us and be clear about it and just say, no, if they want to do this, they got to start over again or do the work, and they can't extend it for another 5 years. Thanks.
Thank you, Rob. So, okay, I got Michael, please.
I think Councillor Winan actually has totally nailed it here. I would like to see a surgical approach. Let us answer the question that is asked. And I think that's the point that is made, and I can agree with that. I recognize that people in the community have many opinions on many things. If we're already on record as to our feelings as to LNG, fair enough. But I don't want to see council extend itself because a lot of people have opinions on a certain subject. I don't think that's the role of the municipal council. So I advocate sticking to the question in hand, supporting that. I don't advocate taking it any further.
Okay, thank you, Michael. So Sue Ellen, you read the,
I'd be happy to.
did you move that recommendation, the original?
I will move it now. Do you want me to read it?
Sure, yes, thank you.
That council direct the interim manager of environment, parks, planning and bylaw services to incorporate the feedback received at council at the May 25th, 2020 meeting about the Woodfibre LNG extension application and submit the extension review as amended at the May 25th, 2020 meeting to the Provincial Environmental Assessment Office prior to May 31st, 2020.
Okay, I'll second that and put it back out there. Is there any further comments? I see there is. Maureen?
Yeah, I want to know what is being provided as feedback from this meeting.
Yeah.
And about what's in Bonnie's report.
I think it's going to be Bonnie's report basically, and that we're in favor of Bonnie's report.
Well, if that's what it is, then you don't want me to put in the parts about to incorporate the feedback received. Is that correct? Because I will rephrase it if council wants.
I think it should be rephrased, and I think it should simply be submit the report prepared by the manager of
Yeah.
parks,
So if,
etc.
yeah, so Hope, if you could draw a line through the words to incorporate the feedback received from council at the May 25th meeting about the Woodfibre LNG application, and just put submit the extension review, again, strike through as amended at the May 25th, 2020 meeting, and then carry on. So it says submit the extension review to the Provincial Environmental Assessment Office prior to May 31st.
Got it.
And I'll accept that friendly amendment.
Okay, and I will second that. I will accept that, and that's great clarification. That's better than what was coming out of there. And okay, so Sue Ellen, are you done then?
Why don't we vote on this one and then we can carry on if we choose to.
I just have a couple other people in there. Allison?
I think
Comments?
Maureen got my comment. I was not going to support incorporating any other comments.
Okay,
The mayor asked me to read it, so I did.
okay, and Rob?
Yeah, I'm a bit confused at this motion because there's nothing in here that says basically simply we don't support the extension. So is that because I don't
Coming
think
up
that was in the
next.
report either. Okay, so it'd be nice to know what is coming up when we're voting on this, because I don't know what I'm voting on right now. So basically we're saying we're going to send this report to the province. That's what we're saying.
Correct. Yeah.
All right. All right.
So I'll ask the question. Everybody in favor of this resolution, please? Hands up.
Aye.
Aye.
I see everyone's hand.
Very
Okay,
good.
thank
Passed
you.
unanimously.
Passed unanimously. Okay, so now we're going to
Maureen,
craft
did you want to make
something else.
yours?
Sorry?
Maureen, did you want to make yours?
Yeah, so I'd like to move that council direct staff to communicate to the Provincial Environmental Assessment Office that Bowen Island continues to not support the Woodfibre LNG project.
Second.
That's nice and simple. Okay, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
But everyone else, and I didn't see your hand.
You have to ask
I'm waiting
opposed.
for him to ask for opposed.
Opposed? Allison, who else?
Michael?
Councillor Kale.
And Kale. Okay, thank you. All right. We're going to move on then. We're going to move down to bylaws, section 6.1, the Bowen Island Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw 498219 and Bowen Island Land Use Bylaw Amendment Bylaw number 499.
So I'm just gonna
2019.
jump in there really quick. I spoke with Daniel today, and unfortunately, he's not able to be here at this meeting.
Correct. Yes, I know.
Sent this, and unfortunately, Emma is not super comfortable or ready presenting this application on Daniel's behalf. So
Okay.
I suggested to Daniel that it be deferred to June 8th.
Okay.
At that time, he would be able to present. And I also let Sat know that earlier as well. So.
All right. Do you want a motion to that effect?
Yeah, just the council defer the following motion to its June 8th regular council meeting.
Okay, and I'll move that. Second.
Sure.
Thank you, David. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And a lot of letters there. And 6.2 is a bylaw amendments to the short-term rental policy number 19/05. And that's Emma also. So yeah. Go
Okay,
ahead.
thank you. Could I get share screen privileges to show the presentation, please?
I don't know how to do that. I've not run into this before. Usually it just works. So I don't know how to do that. I'm sorry, Emma. Can you send it to me? Or I can try to go in and do that. That's new. Zoom keeps changing things on me just to keep me.
Yeah, they do.
Just to keep me on my toes. Hang on, I'll just go in just real quick and see if I can change that.
Okay, well, I
You
just
can transfer the host briefly to Emma and allow her to share her screen that way.
Okay, let's do that. I'll just make Emma the host. Okay, maybe give that a try now, Emma.
Awesome, that worked.
Just don't end the meeting when you leave.
I'll transfer it back right.
Okay.
So just a quick check. Does everyone see this slide?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Mayor and Council. And I'm just going to be reporting back on the referrals for the short-term rental bylaw amendments and bring that back for council consideration at the second reading. So back on the May 27th meeting, council had given first reading to bylaws 501, 502, and 503. And that was for the land use bylaw, the business licensing bylaw, and the bylaw notice enforcement bylaw, respectively. And they referred those bylaws to the Islands Trust, the Advisory Planning Commission, the Community Economic Development Committee, and the Housing Committee, as well as a public open house for comment. And these bylaws are for the implementation of the short-term rental policy number 1905 to establish a regulatory approach for short-term rentals on Bowen Island. That for the benefit of our new CAO, which I forgot to welcome. Hi, Liam, welcome. So going straight into the referral results, we received a response from the Islands Trust Executive Committee on May 14th, stating that they found bylaws 501, 502, and 503 not contrary or at variance with the Islands Trust policy statement. They did express a few concerns around the proposal, mainly impacts from increased density, use of the residential guest accommodation impacting the environment and municipal infrastructure. But they were satisfied that the concerns would be addressed by the regulations in the proposed amendments, specifically that the use will be limited to 120 days, the residential guest accommodation use, and that use will have a limit of 2 guests per bedroom offered, as well as required on-site parking. The Advisory Planning Commission gave unanimous support for both bylaws 502 and 503. Again, that was the business licensing bylaw and the bylaw notice enforcement bylaw. For bylaw number 501, the land use bylaw, 2 members of the commission were in dissent, specifically over the 120-day limit. Those 2 members felt that the 120 days would not provide enough income, would not help long-term rentals, and would not be enforceable.
Mm-hmm.
The Community Economic Development Committee, or the CEDC, in the context of wanting to encourage economic development and resiliency on the island, wanted 2 specific points reconsidered in the amendments, and that is Firstly, the 120-day limit on the use of residential guest accommodations, and secondly, the requirement for on-site parking. And currently, the proposed amendment does require 1 parking space per bedroom offered. They also wanted the contact for the designated individual, which is required as the primary contact for a residential guest accommodation, to only require contact by phone. So that would mean the designated individual does not need to be on the island and does not need to respond to any nuisance complaints in person. In regards to the COVID pandemic, the CEDC did point out that it is a fast-changing economic situation, and any decision-making should be mindful to encourage economic stimulation. From the Housing Advisory Committee, they felt that the bylaw amendments as proposed met the objectives of the short-term rental policy and struck a good balance between providing flexibility for homeowners while still helping to retain and provide long-term rental units. Overall, the committee found the 120-day limit acceptable, although a few members did express a preference for a shorter limit. A virtual open house was held on Thursday, May 21st in the evening, scheduled from 7 to 8 p.m. The actual open house did last until 8:30 p.m. The meeting was held on Zoom and advance registration was required. 37 people registered for this open house and 31 attended. Of those, 13 presented comments and questions, and of those that presented, 8 had identified themselves as short-term rental operators and 2 identified as members of Tourism Bowen Island. And as you can imagine, the main topic of the comments were around the 120-day limit on the use of residential guest accommodation. 8 of the comments felt that the 120 days was too restrictive. However, 5 did acknowledge that some sort of limit should be included in the regulations. 3 felt that 120 days would be too penalizing or punishing to impose on the entire island when they expect only a few potential offenders. 3 people commented that the 120 days would have a significant impact on limiting the growth of tourism as well as general economic growth on the island. And 1 person felt that 120 days would not provide sufficient income for those that relied on short-term rental income. There were also 2 suggestions related to the 120-day limit. 1 person suggested that the 120 days be extended to be longer based on consent from the neighbors. The second suggestion was to allow exceptions to the 120-day limit for certain situations, such as when a home goes on sale, goes on the market, because in some cases such as that, a homeowner may have housing costs for more than 1 home. The remainder of the comments fell into 4 categories fairly equally. Has to do with the licensing fee for residential guest accommodation, the need for more data, the COVID situation, as well as affordable housing. Regarding the license fee, we got 3 comments expressing that they felt it was high, and 1 suggestion to prorate that fee for a license that covered fewer days in the year. And just a quick staff response to that suggestion. Currently, under the business licensing bylaw, there is a prorated fee for a half-year license that is already available. We also got 3 comments asking that there be more data before we proceed with implementation of the amendments, and that's specifically to get an accurate count of the number of whole homes currently being used for short-term rentals, as well as the number of repeat offenders, a study of economic effects from short-term rentals on Bowen Island, as well as gathering opinions of local businesses. And here, just want to make another quick staff comment. I'm not completely sure about the number of repeat offenders because technically short-term rentals are not currently allowed on Bowen Island. So anyone operating a short-term rental right now would be considered a repeat offender. Regarding the COVID pandemic, 3 comments did come in requesting that the amendment process be postponed due to financial hardships caused by the COVID pandemic. And lastly, we also got 3 comments from people that did not support the amendments because they felt they did not directly address critical housing issues in the community, specifically affordable long-term rental housing. So that is a summary of the feedback we got through the referral process. And just to recap the implementation schedule and where we're at right now, the amendment process is scheduled to complete at the end of June with an awareness campaign to run through the summer and targeted information sessions in the fall. The business license for a residential guest accommodation is not expected to be required until the new year in 2021, and enforcement will not start until late spring, early summer, followed with a report back to council at the end of the year in 2021. So based on that schedule, it means we would need to have a public hearing sometime in June, followed by 3rd reading and adoption by end of June, early July. And with regards to staff's recommendation, I understand that there has been quite a lot of feedback that has been received and just presented. That feedback varies quite widely. So at this point, I just want to briefly summarize the process, the progress to date, that the short-term rental policy and the related amendments were based on data that is available for Bowen Island, as well as copious amounts of community feedback from the engagement process through 2019. A lot of research on other communities, what they've done, best practices, what has worked, what is applicable for Bowen Island. And I can say that the regulatory approach that is presented in the policy is well supported to address the community needs that have been identified and based on the resources available to the municipality. As far as the spectrum of regulatory approaches for short-term rental, the one that we are using is considered to be permissive and uses a very friendly enforcement approach. So based on that, staff does recommend that council give 2nd reading to bylaws 501, 502, and 503, and that bylaw 501 for the land use bylaw be referred to a public hearing. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much, Emma. Questions? I don't have my screen. Okay, hold on. And why did I lost my screen there? The hand screen.
If you click on participants, yeah.
Okay, I got it now. Okay, so yeah, Natasha Vaz, you cannot ask questions at this period. Maureen.
I'll be supporting the recommendation. I had 2 questions, Emma. I didn't quite understand the point you were making around exceptions being made for houses that were for sale. And the second question I had was related to whether we actually have any closer fix on the proportion of homes on Bowen that use short-term rental of some sort. So the exceptions question first.
Okay.
Okay, I didn't quite catch the second exception.
And the second question had to do with whether you had a better fix on the number of properties on Bowen that have the percentage of properties on Bowen that have short-term rentals.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so for the first question around the suggestion that was received during the open house to provide an exception for the 120-day, I think the person that was looking for more of an exemption from the 120-day limit, to help supplement his income to cover housing costs as he was trying to sell his home on Bowen Island and sounds like had already purchased a second home off the island.
Thank you.
Okay, and then the second question regarding the comment asking for more accurate data on the number of entire homes being used for short-term rentals on Bowen Island. That is, I mean, we have some preliminary data from, say, host compliance and Airbnb, but it's a moving target. It's very hard to get that accurate count because homes are continually every day going on and off the market. So it's a tricky question. The questions for more data, I understand and I agree we should always make our decisions based on data and have them be well informed. But the data that was presented during the engagement process last year, I feel is hard to be more accurate than what we had.
So I'm not sure, ballpark percentage?
Of the number of whole homes that may be being used for short-term rentals, I don't have that number right now, but it was 123 listings that were found online as of January in 2019. And I believe we have over 1,100, between 1,100 and 1,200 private homes. So if you want to do that math, and not all 123 were entire homes, and it's hard to make that distinction as well.
Okay, maybe I should explain why I'm asking the question. The reason I'm asking the question is that when you held the open house, Emma, and congratulations on getting as many people as you did at the open house, that's actually a very small percentage of the population on Bowen Island. And the feedback that we have been receiving on this largely to date has come from people who are actively involved in short-term rentals. I'm eager to see this go to public hearing so that we can hear from the much, much larger proportion of the population that is not involved in short-term rentals and is potentially impacted by short-term rentals. The impact on neighborhood character, the impact on being able to park on the road where you always parked, all those things that are not related to using homes as a source of income, but rather using homes as a home. So that's the primary reason why I'm supporting sending this to public hearing. I want to hear from the people who aren't in the room yet.
Thank you, Maureen. And that brings up an important point that came up during the open house. One of the questions was how many official bylaw services complaints were logged against short-term rentals, and my response might have been a bit underwhelming, but we don't have a very high formal count. But working in the planning department, let alone bylaw services, I can say that I get a lot of calls regarding short-term rentals from people that do not want to formally lodge a complaint. So these are the residents of the neighborhoods, members of the community that aren't running short-term rentals, but are impacted by them, and they have strong concerns, and they often do not want to lodge official complaints because they don't want to be known as that neighbor that complains against their neighbor. And also they understand there is no other recourse right now since short-term rentals are not permitted, and they don't want to be the cause of having their neighbor's business be shut down. So during the community engagement last year as well, we got a lot of comments from neighbors that didn't want to be on the record. So they're there, and I heard from many of them, but it is true the ones that do speak up and want to have a documented submission are usually the ones that are operating the short-term rentals.
Thank you, Emma.
All right, Allison.
Well, a few things. I guess just having a verbal report, my handwriting is horrible at the best of times, so I've made notes, but I can't read any of them. So I still think we should be deferring this for another 2 weeks so that we can actually have a written report with all those comments in it. and have an opportunity, if we wanted to go and actually look at the video of the public information meeting, which as of this morning was not available on the municipal website. So I don't think we're necessarily a fair process. That's issue number one. Issue number two is if it's not going to be until next January 1st, then adopting the bylaw at the end of July isn't much different than the end of June, and you've still got a number of months to get the word out to everybody. But I would be concerned that we haven't got the word out to everybody now. I spoke to a number of people the other day that didn't know anything about the public information meeting, and so hopefully they did participate. I know Tourism Bowen sent out notices to as many people as possible, but a newspaper ad when people aren't going out and don't want to touch paper, and a notice on the bulletin board that was difficult to read the attachments on the Muni website isn't notice in my mind when you've got a specific area. My other real concern is just that, if there are complaints, there are noise bylaws and we can enforce, and if there's a really bad actor, because it's not allowed, you could shut them down. And I guess the other is just the stores and the shops and the merchants. I mean, it's not just the B&B operators, but the restaurants that we like to eat out in the wintertime aren't going to be there if there aren't tourists and eating in them in the summertime. And the art galleries aren't going to be, the artists aren't going to survive because nobody's buying their stuff. So, and the 120 days is just going to force everything into the 4 months of the summer and the shoulder season, and that helping everybody survive through the fall, the winter, and the early spring isn't going to happen. So I think we should dump the 120 days, and if it turns out to be a problem, then we can cut back, but let's go without 120 days.
Right, thank you, Alison. Rob?
Yeah, I want to see this go forward to a public hearing as well, and maybe afterwards, Emma, you can comment a bit on what that public hearing will look like in this time of COVID right now, because I think it is important, as Maureen said, that we get a really good perspective from the broader community versus more of a self-interested part of the sector right now. For me, to comment on Councillor Morse's comment about the 120 days, and I know that's been a sticking point for a number of people. For me, the dividing line with the short-term rental is, we need to, the balancing act is we don't lose affordable rental housing on Bowen Island by people renting out residential properties to tourists. And the 120 days, I think, is more than generous. I think there's actually very few that actually go over the 120 days. And the whole point of this is, if you want to run a commercial enterprise, get a commercial license. Don't do it under short-term rental. So we need to put something in there. And I think if you give way more than the 120, it's going to be much harder to peel back. And I think I'm already challenged with even going to 120 days. So I think that is very, as Emma put it, very permissive. And I think this policy is very permissive. And I don't want to see long-term rental housing turned into tourism housing. And if we just open the floodgates and let people rent it out at all times of the year, unlimited, that's likely what will happen. Plus property values will go up. So I very strongly support the 120 days. The purpose of this is to allow people that have an empty house sitting to potentially help defer some of those costs. It's not to make this an economic business for them. And that's, for me, if it's an economic driver and you want to make money doing this, get a commercial license. So I support this moving forward and going to public hearing. And Emma, if you can just comment a bit on what that public hearing will look like. Hopefully it's more than just a Zoom meeting, but I'll let you explain that.
Actually, I think I would defer to Hope.
Okay.
Yeah, I can speak to that. With the ministerial order that came out allowing for electronic public hearings, that is definitely something that was probably the way we would go. There's other municipalities that have had public hearings, and they're sort of paving the way in terms of what they're doing to advertise and get their public notice requirements in. and how members of the public can engage in the public hearing. So that is, in my mind, where we would go as well. Just follow what the other municipalities are doing in terms of electronic public hearings.
Thank you, Hope. That good, Rob?
Hope. Yeah, just a comment to Hope, and know this public hearing will probably take maybe a month, or that it will be down the road a bit. It'd be interesting to see what we can do more than just electronic format. If there is some way we can do a social distancing meeting or something moving down the road. I know things are changing week to week. I think we're missing a lot of people if we just go electronic. So that's my concern. So I know it's challenging, and maybe things will be different in a couple of months from now, but just to keep that open as a possibility, I think is important.
We could certainly look into that and holding it at a different venue than Municipal Hall. I think Municipal Hall is not ideal for that, but we can work on those logistics at another time.
Okay, Sue Ellen, and we've got 3 more speakers here, and I think we got to get some brevity on this and move along, but go ahead, Sue Ellen.
Well, now I really feel like being long. No, I'll be short. I support the motion. I want to hear from the community, and I refer back to the official community plan that we did back in 2010. The municipal council, I should say, did it. I was on the steering committee. The 2 main dominant themes, one was a green oasis of an island, peace and quiet. The second was affordable housing. That's one of the reasons I'm supporting that we move these recommendations in front of us. The other is that we need some regulation in order to keep our community, like all other islands and even major cities and everybody all around the world, even rural areas. It's a disruptive change, and I think we need to regulate it. So I would like to move the motion.
Okay, stand by. Michael?
Yeah, I'm going to pick up on Alison's point. Very unfortunately, the open meeting last week, which Emma held in the evening, which she referred to, the video was only available. I had to ask for it, and it was available this morning. I got it this morning. It was not readily available on the municipal website. And I'm really sorry that more people, more councillors haven't had a chance to look at that video, because there's a lot of input there. I get the point about coming up for overall discussion on a broader audience, but I'm sorry this is moving forward at this stage. I've had a chance to speak to Revelstoke, and I've had a chance to speak to Nelson, to the key people there in both those communities who have been involved in work that we're discussing right now. And my regret is that we are actually proceeding forward at this stage. I would like to have given it seriously just 2 more weeks for us to have some more discussion. There is a lot more to us to listen to. I learned so much by speaking to the head of planning at Nelson. And I regret that we're actually forwarding this. I understand the reason, but actually I would like to hold it back. I would like to hold it back longer. There is so much more. And I have to tell you, I have huge concerns with this bylaw as it stands, liberalizing bed and breakfast, opening it up across the island. I call it a bylaw of unintended consequences. So I would actually like us to be able to give some more thought to this. Given the industry is being brought to a standstill, I really think also it's very unfortunate and very unsympathetic to force this through or push this through right now. Please, could we not give this just a little bit more time before we move to the next reading? And that's my comments.
Thank you, Michael. On to David.
Thank you, Gary. I'm sympathetic to Michael and Alison's points, but I feel that I guess I want to move forward. I know that a lot of the work was just done. The consultation work was just done in the last few days. I thought Emma's report was, as usual, very thorough, covered the territory well, and like some of our other speakers, I'd like to go to a public hearing and hear what other people in the community have to say. this is a very difficult issue. Emma's worked on this for a long time. She's heard from a lot of people. We have passionate opinions on both sides. I feel the 120 days is a reasonable effort to limit the profitability of short-term rentals so that it doesn't overcompete with the long-term rental side. So I'd like to move forward. So I'm ready to support this motion.
Emma, you got your hand up? Thank you, David. Emma?
Yeah, just before I forget, this was the first virtual open house that Bowen Island has held. And in the past, when we held open houses, it was really not customary for council members to attend generally. But now that we do have recordings, and after listening to Michael's comments, I'm wondering if this is something that we should put into the protocol to share the recording once it's available with mayor and council.
Okay, thank you, Emma. My comments are on this is we keep going, well, not back and forth, we keep going down this road, and this is a very complicated issue, and we are not going to get it right the first time. There's going to be adjustments, and the big key here, I think, is that we move forward, we get something going, there's going to be a review after 1 year, and we can correct some of the issues. I think we've got to get it out there, and I think we've got to get it in place to find out what those are going to be. Plus, I want to see the public hearing to see what people are actually thinking about this in a broader scope. So with that, I'm prepared to read the recommendation. The bylaw number 501/2020 cited as Bowen Island Municipality Land Use Bylaw number 57, 2002 Amendment Bylaw number 501/2020 be read a second time, and the bylaw number 502/2020 cited as Bowen Island Municipal Business Licensing Bylaw number 465/2018 Amendment Bylaw number 502/2020 be read a second time, and the bylaw number 503/2020 cited as Bowen Island Municipality Bylaw Notice Enforcement Bylaw number 196/2008 Amendment Bylaw number 503/2020 be read a second time, and the council refer bylaw 501/2020 to a public hearing. I move that, and
second.
Okay, so you got somebody hope there, and any further discussion? I'll ask a question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And opposed?
Yes.
Okay.
Gary, you didn't give me a chance to speak. You know, when you
I
asked if
did.
there was
I
any
asked if
further
there was any further
discussion.
comments.
Well, I had my hand up.
Oh.
So
Sorry.
can I just ask, now that this is going ahead to public hearing, will there be a written commentary done of the comments from the public information meeting? We usually get a staff report that summarizes the feedback from the committees and the public information meeting. So will that be available before the public hearing?
Would you like me to include it in the staff report? Or do you want something earlier?
I think it needs to be earlier so that people can read it, not the day of the public hearing.
The report is usually published the week before.
Well, since you must have had some notes from what you said tonight, so they couldn't just be typed up and posted on the project page?
Yep, I could definitely write up a summary that be included in the public hearing information package.
All right, Allison.
I prefer it earlier, but that's fine.
Well, I think that'll be adequate. Okay, thank you, everybody. We're going to move on to 6.3, which is Allison, that's back to you, and that's 3.6 on the consent agenda, which is speed regulation bylaw, traffic and land use bylaw number 133, and Emma is going to be working on that.
Okay, I asked that be pulled because we've had, Hope, have you got the picture from Murray Atherton of the 40K speed limit sign that's on Eagle Cliff Road by Lieben that I forwarded to you? I don't know whether we should post it if people don't believe me that they're, my concern right now is we're saying this is to put into effect the speed limits that are in existence now. And right now we've got a 20K speed limit, if I'm reading the map correctly, showing from the old Eagle Cliff Road intersection all the way out to Cove Road in Hood Point. And then all of a sudden that 20K becomes 30K in front of the Hood Point playground and tennis courts. And then it becomes 40K all the way out to Hood Point West. Right now there is a 40-kilometer speed limit sign going north in front of, just before the Lieben property, 1395 Eagle Cliff Road. So I'm thinking we need to defer this so that staff can go out and look at the signs. And we've also had a request from Hood Point, chair of the Hood Point householders, that they have a chance to look at it and submit some information. And I don't see what harm it would have to wait for another 2 weeks and let staff have a look at the logic of having a 30K go to 20K and all of a sudden to 30K in front of a playground and then to 40K. I think the 40K, and when there's a 40K sign already in an area that you're all of a sudden going to make 20. If we shared in the traffic fine revenue and got it directly, maybe I wouldn't be so concerned because it would mean money in our coffers. But the traffic fine revenue just goes to the province. So I think we should defer this, and so staff can have a look at the anomalies in the map and between the map and the existing signage.
Emma, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, the map was, as mentioned before, was based on GIS data from Public Works, and Public Works was supposed to have ground truthed it and checked the roads to verify those speed limits. So if there are any inaccuracies, I fully support that that we check them again.
Does the map that we have for that section correspond with the actual signs that are out there? That's, I guess, my big question.
That would be my question as well, because I never actually drove it. It was given to Public Works to do that.
Gary, that was my point. I have a sign, a photograph that shows a 40K sign in front of 1395 Eagle Cliff, which is the entrance to Lieben area. And that shows us 40K. The map we have right now is showing that area as 20 in the bylaw. I think the problem is there are some of those slow to 20 curve caution signs, and same problem we had with Charlie's Lane and Meadowbrook Corner. So I think we should, if Emma's okay with deferring it, I would move that we defer this to the next meeting.
Well, have these signs just not been replaced, Emma, to correspond with the maps?
The map, we haven't passed the bylaw yet, so you can't replace it.
Yeah, so why would the signs be the same as the maps then?
They're different.
Well, of course they are, but they'll change once the bylaws pass.
Why would an area that's marked 40K right now go down to 20?
I'd like to support the motion for deferral.
I would second that.
We've got a second and a third.
I got my hand up here.
Yeah.
I got my hand up just to. Yeah.
Go ahead, Rob, and then we'll see what we're going to do here.
Thanks. Just question to Emma. Emma, if we pass this bylaw tonight, can we make those changes afterwards? My understanding is that this is not going to hold up those kind of changes, and there'll probably be more changes we'll need to make in different areas based on different reasons. But my understanding is we can move this bylaw forward, and those changes that Councillor Morris, for instance, brought up, we can make those if we need to. Is that correct, or am I wrong on that?
The traffic and use of streets bylaw can be further amended, and staff anticipates that the speed designations will be amended from time to time to reflect changes in community needs. At this point, there are no designated speed limits, so we are just looking for a starting point. But if it's clearly incorrect, and staff would support that it be in alignment with the actual speed limit on the road. The intent is not to change existing speed limits. So I think either way, it's up to council if you would like to pass the bylaw tonight and start with this as your starting point and amend in the future, or to defer and try and fix any inaccuracies. And it's council's decision.
Yeah, thank you, Emma. And I think given the circumstances and Doug raised questions for Hood Point, maybe we should just get these clarified before we move forward. I don't think there's that much urgency in it. So I would move to defer or second.
It's been
already
seconded
moved it,
and
did you,
thirded,
Maureen?
Gary.
Sorry?
We have a motion already on the floor.
Okay, so I'll second that motion.
It's been
Been
thirded
seconded.
and fourth.
Oh, it has? Okay,
Yes.
I'll ask a question then. If there's any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Deferral.
Aye.
Deferral, yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay. Just got to catch up here. I think we're on 7.1. And that'll be the collaborative project services agreement with the NERP neighborhood kiosks. And that's you too, Emma.
It's my last one tonight, I promise. Oh dear. I have a brief presentation, super brief. Actually, Ed had actually presented most of the information. So if Hope you don't want to bother with the logistics of switching hosts again, I'll just speak to it. The NERP organization that had presented in the public comment at the beginning of this meeting, Ed Watchman had already given you an introduction to NERP, what they do and why they're important, especially in times of emergency, such as the COVID response that we've been experiencing for some time now. And they would like to construct neighborhood kiosks throughout the island as a visible and more effective way of sharing emergency information and supplies across the island to help build community resiliency. So this has been brought to council previously at an April meeting, and council had directed staff to prepare a collaborative project service agreement with neighborhood organizations such as NERP to support them in their efforts in constructing such kiosks. So the design, which actually I don't think Ed did show, but he showed some similar designs. It's essentially 2 posts with a gable roof to provide some shelter for a sign. It's very simple. The design has been referred and reviewed by the planning department, public works, as well as the building inspector, and we do find it to be acceptable for its purpose. 2 locations have been identified, one in Miller Landing and one in Queen Charlotte Heights, that have also been reviewed and found acceptable by staff. So the draft agreement that is included in the staff report has been reviewed by legal counsel and as well as NERP. So the main obligations of the municipality would be to cover the permitting cost and expediting it through the permitting process, to cover insurance of volunteer workers when they are working on the project, both construction and maintenance, and to take over ownership of the structure once it's completed, also for insurance purposes. And municipality will also be approving the design of the structure, and NERP's responsibilities will be designing the structure, providing the construction costs, materials, and labor, as well as updating the kiosks with the emergency information and any emergency supplies. I think that covers it. So unless there's any questions, staff does recommend that council approve the agreement.
All right, thank you, Emma. Questions? Sue Ellen, I've got first.
Thank you. My question is just a quick one about the financial implications. The last bit in that part says that financial support for this and other projects comes from the Alternative Transportation Fund. Is that correct? Or should it be the emergency program?
That was actually from Daniel's previous report. So I'm just taking over in his absence. And I think he had just suggested that it was a possible source of funding. So I don't know if Raj has any more insight into potential funding sources for this project.
Okay. Is that it, Sue?
Well, I didn't, Raj, can you answer?
I'm not certain whether the alternative transportation funding reserve would be an appropriate source of funding. I'd have to look at the bylaw itself. I do know that that bylaw says that that is a funding source for transportation infrastructure. So
Yeah.
if what we're doing qualifies as transportation infrastructure and as capital, then we very well could use it as a funding source.
Okay, it just seems to me to be emergency program related and not, I would just, I don't think it's appropriate to take the money at this time from the Alternative Transportation Fund, unless it's going to have some distinctive purpose, like be located at Bow and lift stops, or be used as a bus shelter, or but I didn't see anything like that kind of design part in the reports or the earlier bit. So it hangs there as a question for me, but otherwise I'm in support of this proposal.
Okay, thanks, Sue. Rob?
Yeah, so Sue Ellen, thank you for raising that one, because that was my first one. And, you know, we actually just set up that fund because we had no money set aside for alternative transportation initiatives, which was part of our strategic plan. So that's the reason we put that money there. So obviously, hopefully to typo, obviously taking those kind of funds for a NERP project would be inappropriate. So that was my point, and I think we just need to be cognizant of that money is to promote alternative transportation, not for other areas that don't have money assigned to them. And a question for you, and I asked this of Edward earlier, about the location. So there's 2 locations, but there's funding for potentially more locations. And there were a couple of locations that were sort of put on, I don't know, the back burner, or let's leave them alone for now. One of them being on the north end of the island, the Mount Gardner area. And something about a riparian zone issue and whatnot. I don't know if you've been on site there. I was there today looking at the site, and it's right next to some other signs and the mailboxes and all that. So I don't think that's an issue over there. I'm just wondering if I'm missing something there, or if there's a possibility you could look at that, or maybe go out to that site with the proponents there, because I know they're pretty keen to have a site up that way as well.
Yep. That site, the original 5 sites actually were shared with me for review, and I was the one that pointed out that they are in riparian areas, as well as a general development permit area for watershed protection. So these are requirements under the land use bylaw, and they don't fall under an exemption. The riparian area requirements are provincial, so that's definitely something that we cannot exempt.
Yeah. Environmental.
Am I just to follow up? Have you been to that site yet? That area, the Mount Gardner mailbox area?
I've seen the
it's
pictures.
basically.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah,
there's already an existing sign and mailboxes. And Judy actually told me that Canada Post had recently upgraded the gravel foundation there. So I need to investigate as to the extent of work done by Canada Post and whether or not a development permit was obtained. But regardless, this particular project of installing a kiosk, especially since it's under municipal direction and will eventually be under our ownership, we need to make sure we do cross our T's and dot our I's.
Correct. Is that it, Rob?
Yep. Thanks.
Okay. Over to Allison.
If I heard Ed correctly, they've got funding, grant funding.
Funding, yeah.
for the first two, because he was talking about, you know, they'd identified 5, they got enough funding for 2. And if you read the report,
No,
the
these
role
are-
of NERPs is to find the funding to build the kiosks. So I don't think there was any, you know, so these first 2 aren't going to, they're grant funding, I think, from the Community Foundation's Resilience
Right.
Fund or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Your Worship, I think my sense of it is that the costs that are referred to in the report are likely the value of the permit fees that would be waived, not really, and so not related to construction costs, because Allison's right. The construction costs are paid through the grant from the Resilience Fund. So it's
Correct.
the value of the permit fee that was waived.
Okay, thanks, Dennis. Maureen?
Thank you. My point was the same. I read the alternative transportation bylaw and it's not appropriate at all, given what's specified there. The estimated cost of the permits, which Dennis just referred to, is less than $500. So we're not talking about a significant amount of money for the. So I'd like to just suggest, I mean, do we even need this? But council needs to direct staff to find an alternative source of funding. And I'll look to Dennis for this. I mean, do we need to do that, or is the amount so insignificant that we shouldn't worry?
Raj is not with us. I don't know if Aoife has a comment on that.
Oh, Raj is here. Sorry.
I would say the
Sorry, Raj, I missed you.
so insignificant that we do not have to worry.
Okay, thank you.
We'll find it somewhere.
Yeah. And back to Sue Ellen. Sue Ellen, I think your mic's off.
There we go. Sorry, music happening in the background. I would just like to move the motion
Okay, go ahead.
that council approve the Neighbourhood Emergency Response Program Neighbourhood Kiosks Collaborative Project Services Agreement as attached to the staff report dated May 19th, 2020, and that council authorize the mayor and corporate officer to execute such agreement on behalf of Bowen Island Municipality.
Thank you. Second? Okay, I'll second
I'll
that.
second.
Okay.
Any further comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
How we doing, Hope? Get them all?
Looks like everyone.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Now I can go home. 7.2, which is the Fire Department Core Services Review Implementation Plan. Aaron Hannon. Aaron, it's over to you.
All right. Thank you, Mayor and Council, and welcome, Liam, as well. As directed by Council, I have created a high-level priority-based report on the recommendations from the Fire Department Core Services Review. One thing I should mention is that the numbering of the recommendations report may be somewhat out of order just due to the fact that the recommendations have actually been sorted by priority.
Okay, thank you.
So if you're referring to any of the numbers in there, they could be out of order. But yeah, I don't really have a lot more to add to my written report, but hopefully I can answer any questions that anybody may have.
Okay. Any questions out there? I'm good with it. I appreciate what you did here, Aaron, and I think it's very timely and it's considered, and it's a slow, methodical approach into it, which we're going to need. And I see Allison up. Go ahead.
Thanks, Aaron. It's a great report. I just want to make sure that you can move forward with some of the dollars and cents, the items that require money this year. And so I'm looking at paragraph 2 of the recommendation. And I'm suggesting that we insert the words after the brackets that cannot be covered by the 2020 budget, so that it would read, council direct staff to include the items identified as high priority bracket requiring operational or capital funding bracket that cannot be covered by the 2020 budget in the 2021 budget planning process. And that enables you to, if you can find some money in your 2020 budget, to move forward with some of the items that require dollars.
Right, yeah, I definitely feel that there are some things we can move forward with the current operating budget. So yeah, I would like to do that.
Okay.
So
As a
I'll
friendly-
move the motion as
Yeah.
amended.
I see
Okay.
Raj's hand is up.
I was just going to
yeah.
point out to council that we did put an extra $35,000 in the 2020 budget to address things that may come up, primarily training. This is what we thought was going to come up as an additional cost in 2020. It's operating budget.
Okay, so we can look at that, those monies to see if they can fit in there, Aaron, I guess, eh?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, now David, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I got it, Gary, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Aaron. This is excellent and really appreciate there's a huge amount of work here. I've just got a couple of little questions where I didn't quite understand. I'm looking at your table now.
Yep.
And I like the way you've organized it, but I didn't understand the difference between 6 and 9 and 6 and 10. Is it because in 6, if you've got time to have a look at that one, it's administrative support and training support. And so we got some money in there. Then 9 is administrative support. Is that the same thing? And then in 10, it's adding a training officer. We've got an allocation of budget. So I'm a bit confused as to what's the difference between 6 and 9.
Some of these things overlap just simply due to the fact that the recommendations out of the core review were overlapping. So some of these numbers, the total that I've got in the actual report of how much money we require is accurate. But if you were to add up all of these things, you would come to a higher number just simply because some of them are overlapping.
Oh, okay. So it's not double counting in any way.
No,
These are
not double counting.
bits of the job and allocated in different spots. That's all.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Aaron. I got that. Yeah.
Okay, and I see Maureen.
Forgive me if this is in the report and I'm just not picking up on it. What would be the total FTE increase once all these recommendations are implemented?
I believe I had that at a 1.4, and I'm not sure if that is actually in the report or not.
And that's the training officer and the admin officer and potential increases to the chief and the deputy chief? What is that?
That's just for training and admin. The chief and the deputy chief's positions would stay as they currently are.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anybody else?
So Gary, I moved the motion,
Okay,
but we didn't have anybody seconding it.
I'll second it.
okay, thank you, David. Any further discussion? And all in favor?
Wait,
As
is that
that-
the motion? Sorry, is that the motion with the change that
the
Councillor
amendment,
Morse
yeah.
put in? Okay,
Yeah.
just checking that was actually, because I didn't know if that had been,
I
that
said
was
I
the form.
moved the motion with that wording in it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
And I second knowing that.
yeah, thanks, Sue Ellen. I was just gonna say as amended. Okay, any further discussion? I'll ask the question, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All hands?
Good, thank you. Okay. Thank you, Aaron. That's
Thank
great,
you.
great operation there. And okay, so we're gonna move into the COVID-19 restart plan for Bowen Island Municipality. Jen McGowan.
Hello, Mayor and Council. Thank you
Hello.
for having me. So I'm assuming you've all read the report, but basically we just highlighted the impacts of COVID on the municipality and want to have a measured approach to reopening, ensuring that the primary focus remains, the safety and well-being of staff and members of the public who visit our sites. So in addition to what you see in front of you, there are individual COVID-19 safety plans as required by WorkSafe. in place or in development across departments, depending on their reopening schedule. And I think maybe Dennis is better to speak to this, or Liam perhaps, but we had originally intended this as for information, but based on some information received last week, we're asking that council now adopts this policy with any amendments they recommend.
Thank you,
All
Jen.
right, thanks, Jen.
I did send a memo out to, I sent an email out to Mayor and Council last Friday noting just exactly that based on a webinar that staff participated in where Don Lidstone was speaking, he was recommending that these restart plans be actually approved by council as a policy document. And so we are asking that the recommendation change to approve the restart plan as opposed to receive it for information. The only other thing I would add is that the restart plan that is before council this evening is also in line with the regional approach that's taken by other municipalities throughout the Metro Vancouver area. Myself and other staff have been participating in meetings, and so the desired objective here is to try and align ourselves with the regional approach, and this does that.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. Questions?
Gary?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, just a question for Jen. Jen, there's been a bit of talk about just the need to potentially create a bit more space in the cove with the social distancing and restaurants and whatnot. And particularly a question, I don't know if you've looked at this yet, but the sidewalks on Bowen right now, if we're asking people to physically distance 6 feet apart, that's obviously not going to be happening in the summer on our sidewalks because we just don't have that kind of space there. Is that something that EOC have thought about, or do we need to start looking at that? I guess what I don't want to run into is in the middle of the summer, we have everybody out on the sidewalk and we're telling everybody they need to stay 6 feet apart, but our facilities won't allow for that to happen. So I don't want to run into that conflict when it starts getting busy outside and things start opening up more.
You're referring specifically to the sidewalks for pedestrian use, not for expanded business use?
Well, I mean, that's where I can see definitely some conflict happening. Like, I don't see how we can manage the sidewalks. Like, it's at some spots, it's like 1.5 meters with a telephone post in the middle. How are people going to physically distance walking up and down in the cove, which is going to get pretty busy in the summer?
Yeah, I guess I would just suggest that the municipality continues to echo and amplify the recommendations of the provincial health officer. So if you're not able to physically distance in a space, you're being asked now to wear a mask. So if Bowen Island municipality isn't able to allow people to distance acceptably, then maybe that's the recommendation that needs to be made.
Well, I just want to make a comment that I don't think people are going to be wearing masks walking up and down the sidewalk all summer. And I know that, for instance, I work for North Van Municipality. I'm setting up a fitness center right now, and we need to provide space for people to physically distance. We don't have an option not to do that. So, I mean, I think we need to look at that. I know in some areas they've taken away some of the parking and to widen the sidewalk out. But I mean, I think it's unrealistic to ask people when they're walking in the cove to have to wear a mask for the entire day. So, I mean, if there's things that we can as a council do to create that space, I want to know, I'd like us to look at that and know about it and not sort of wind up in the middle of summer with a big problem on our hands.
All right. Maureen?
Thank you. There was a lively conversation at this morning's Community Economic Development Committee meeting around some of those space issues that had come up last week during the Zoom meeting that we held for businesses. And it has to do with the potential expansion of Cove Bay businesses into their own parking areas, or potentially into public space. There'll be a recommendation coming forward from the CEDC asking that council essentially recognize the challenges that Bowen business has experienced during COVID-19, and that council directs staff to move quickly and appropriately on any requests from the Bowen business community to enable them to recover more effectively and serve our residents more effectively. So that's going to be coming, but I guess my point is that the focus, and it's the appropriate focus of the municipal restart plan, is on municipal operations. But there are a lot of elements of the community restart where I think that flexibility and creativity on the part of the municipality could go a long way towards making things easier over the summer. So the points that Rob was making about, you know, our sidewalks aren't big enough. Well, is there a creative way that we could deal with that? And I think that increasingly we're going to be asked to do that, and we should be prepared to be as flexible appropriately as we can.
Yeah, that's a good point, Maureen. I think we have to be very flexible going in with requests. I did talk to one of the owners in the Cove, and they don't need any more space because they basically don't have the staff to do it. So, you know, that's also an issue, but I think we have to be a little bit resilient and responsive to people that do feel that we could just amend a bylaw for a little while to get them through this part of it. Any other comments on that?
Gary?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Alison.
I just wanted to say, remember that there's very limited parking in the Cove, and people need to be able to park, to shop and buy at the eat at the restaurants, buy in the stores. So I'm not sure that, you know, encroaching into the parking is really going to be of a general economic benefit, but certainly, you know, some of them have spaces within their own lots that they could add into that, you know, so we shouldn't hold up liquor license processing and things like that. So, which the LCB has acknowledged that they will process quickly. So
No, absolutely correct. Yeah, but they're all going to have to find their own way. That's and we just have to be there prepared to help them out.
yeah, and
Sue Ellen? Okay,
process
sorry.
permits and things like that quickly.
Yeah,
so that they can get going.
Absolutely. Sue
Yeah.
Ellen?
Thank you. I read the COVID restart plan for Bowen Island Municipality carefully, and it looks great to me. I support this, and I'd like to make the motion. So
Okay,
I'd like
go
to
ahead.
move that council approve the COVID-19 restart plan for Bowen Island Municipality dated May 15th, 2020.
Okay, thank you. And a second on that we have?
Yes.
Okay, thank
Gary.
you. Any further discussion? I'll ask a question. Oh, wait a minute. Sue Ellen, you got, okay, you're just talking.
Oh, sorry, that was.
I'll ask a question. All in favor? Aye.
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 Okay. Good hope, yeah. All right.
Thanks, Jen.
Thanks,
So we're
Jen.
gonna, yeah, thank you very much, Jen. 7.4 development variance permit application. And that's DVP 04/2020 at 651 Laura Road, Better Service Quarter. And that's Jennifer Pierce.
Thank you. Hello, Mayor and Council.
Hi.
I'll try to keep this quick. It should be pretty simple, I hope. So this is a variance permit for a secondary suite to allow for a larger sized secondary suite than is typically permitted. So the variance would be to increase the maximum allowable size of a detached secondary suite from 115 square meters to 214 square meters. And there's a very specific reason why, so I need to kind of explain the history of the site. So the location is kind of in the southwest central area of Bowen Island here. It's not in Miller Landing. Sorry, that's an error. That's not the neighborhood. But anyway, but the location is correct. So it's on Laura Road there in a relatively large lot. And in the aerial photograph, you can see a building there. And that is an existing residence that has been for some time rented out. So the owner is now building a new home further to the northeast of that existing home. And the original intent of the owner was to demolish the existing home and build a new home, and the renters would then move elsewhere, and the new home would be the owner's personal residence. So we have been in communication before because the new home's location was in a DPA. So they came through and put in a development permit, which was approved in 2019. So that was how that original development permit was presented. Since then, the owner has been in conversations with the tenant in the home that is currently renting. And the tenant was very concerned that they would not be able to find a rental unit on the island that would suit their needs and was similar to this one, particularly because of its size and capacity to serve a family size household. So you can go to the next slide there, Hope. So here we can see the new primary dwelling to be built, which has already been gone through the development permit process for the DPA. And then just south of that, you see in the darker yellow, the existing building, which is not proposed to have any changes, but the change that is precipitating this variance permit is that it's to remain in place as is. So what this variance permit is asking for is a larger secondary suite. But what we've put in the draft permit are some items to help guarantee that it would be used in a manner that is consistent with both the OCP and also the intentions as stated by the owner. So if you go to the next slide, please, Hope. I've just put in an excerpt here from the draft DVP to emphasize how it's a bit different than some of our other variance permits. And what we've put in here is a requirement that the applicant create a housing agreement under section 219 with the renter, and that would guarantee that it's maintaining its use as a long-term rental building, and that it would not be used for other types of uses, and that it would be maintained at an affordable rental rate, and that it would not be renovated to some high degree that would effectively change the building's structure in some in a major way. So it allows for minor updates, but not major construction. And that would specifically include sustainability features, but would also be minor renovations. The intention here being that the intent would be maintained over time, even if the lot were to be sold or ownership were to be shifted somehow. So that's the nature of the project. So now we can go to the next slide, Hope. This is now the recommendation that notice would be given that council is considering the issuance of this DVP. So I hope that was clear.
All right, thanks, Jen. Okay, questions? I see Maureen.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. I've got 3 questions. The first one is, what is the proposed length of the agreement of the house, of the term of the housing agreement? And does the new build, is it within the permitted lot coverage? And the third question is, what does as legally permitted mean? Maintain an affordable rental rate as long as legally permitted.
So your lot coverage question is, yes, it is within the lot coverage. It's RR1 and it's quite a large lot. So there's no lot coverage violation here. The only variance is the size of the secondary suite.
Okay.
In terms of the length, that kind of is the same question as your other question. I admit it's a little strangely worded, but the intention here, it may need a bit of wordsmithing, is that the agreement be as long as it can possibly be under provincial legislation in section 219. So because we're trying to operate right now without Daniel and still move forward and get some variance permits in there, my hope is that this wording would allow us to have a permit move forward, and that those nuances would be worked out with the housing when the housing agreement is being arranged. So basically this variance permit requires that a housing agreement be reached with approval of the municipality. So we have the opportunity at that time to work out exactly what that length would be, but this directs that creation to say that it needs to be as long as it legally can be. If that
Okay, thank you.
All right, David?
Almost the same question, but the affordable part of that last point, how on earth would that be defined? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I'm sorry, but it has kind of the same response as Maureen's question, which is basically that it would follow the provincial guidelines of affordability because the standard housing agreements do have affordability provisions. So at the time that we work out the housing agreement is when that would be specifically defined. So these guidelines that are in the permit simply outline what is the kind of standard to be followed or the policy to be followed, rather than defining each thing like a bylaw might do.
Okay, I guess I'm still a bit puzzled. I mean, the provincial government has specific affordability, and I forget the acronym, around 30% of your income and so on. Is that what you're talking about? Or you just mean, hey, let's keep this reasonable and not make it an expensive home? I guess I don't really know what you're meaning.
So it's leaving it open to interpretation during the second negotiating
Okay, all right. Okay.
So it may be that council would like to have additional specificity there, but right now it's left more open.
Okay, I mean, I certainly like the general approach. I mean, this is obviously better than taking that building and knocking it down and sending the people off the island. So I like the approach, but let's just see how this develops over time then, sure. Thank you.
All right, thanks, David. Rob?
Chad, I guess the only concern the main concern I have is that usually with the secondary suites, it's somebody has a primary residence and they build another house for their kids or whatnot. This is a different one where somebody has a primary residence, they're going to build a bigger primary residence, and then they want to convert their primary residence into their into their secondary suite or home. And I'm just around, and especially considering, we're almost wanting double the space size, that this is going to be something that we're going to see moving forward, and that it's not in the spirit of the whole secondary unit bylaw, why we put it in place. Can you just comment on that from a planning perspective, why this one is so unique and that we should consider it?
Well, here we get into some of the trade-off issues between certain policies within the OCP and others, right? So the OCP supports maintaining community and affordability in place and maintaining homes in place. So this is one where we're kind of tipping in that direction, particularly because there is a family that lives in that home and has been in that home. So as long as we can get an agreement that would show that we could maintain this as a long-term rental into the future, at least as long as the building is maintained in place. Obviously, the building will have a lifespan. So that could impact how long it would be viable for before some new agreement would need to be reached. But that at least we're kind of erring on the side of affordable housing in this particular case. But it does have a trade-off in terms of density and in having, now admittedly, this same site could have 2 homes there, 1 secondary suite and 1 home. So we're not actually increasing the number of dwellings, but because the secondary suite being larger allows for us a larger household size to be more comfortably housed there, it potentially has a slight population density increase. So it's kind of in the trade-off zone, I would say.
Jen, if they had come to us when they did their original development permit, but said we're going to keep the house and rent it out, would we have granted them that development permit at that time?
No.
Development permits
We
for
probably
water
wouldn't.
setbacks.
Well, they wanted to include another house on the property if they had been, so the problem is that people can then say, okay, I'm going to tear down this house, therefore let me build a bigger house. And then they come full circle and say, okay, now we're not going to tear down the house. Let us keep it and go around sort of the space size. So that's my concern about the go around. How that's happening.
Right, and that's why the variance permit doesn't simply allow a variance. It comes with these caveats that guarantee affordable housing and maintenance of the long-term tenant. So it would not allow, for example, someone to build the secondary home and then to move in a family member into the original home and still boot out the current residents. It would provide protections for that. So that's sort of the mitigating factor, such that you don't have everybody seeing this and then wanting to do a similar thing.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, John.
Okay, Allison?
I was going to speak in favor of this. I mean, it's a large lot, pushing 5 acres if I'm turning it into, and lots, and it's not, and there's already a family in there renting it now, and if they had to tear it down, that family would be displaced. For privacy reasons, we don't know who the family is, but they could be very well, loved citizens of the community. And so why tear down a perfectly good house that a family's living in when we have need of rental stock on the thing? I mean, it's a large lot, so you're not necessarily going to find people being able to build that large a second residence on other lots just because of the lot coverage issue. So I think this is sort of a no-brainer, and we should definitely go for it. And the development permit, I'm thinking, Jennifer, would have been something for stream setbacks or something like that?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the proposed new building was within the 30 meters of the stream. So that was the development permit. So in the case of if they had requested the variance at the same time, it would have come to council at that time. With the variance, right?
But one doesn't hinge on the other really at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll move the motion if nobody else wants to say it.
I've had my hand
Well,
up.
hold on.
I've
Sue
had my
Ellen?
hand up for a bit.
Yes, Sue Ellen, yeah,
I
go
just
ahead.
wanted to say that it looks like a good idea to me. This is why we passed the secondary suite bylaw, and this protects it as affordable housing, and that this is only a recommendation that notice be given. So I'm interested in hearing what other Bowen Islanders have to say before we really come, before it comes before us for a decision. So I'd be happy to move the motion. Except I think Allison wanted to move it.
Well, I moved it, you can second it.
Okay.
Well, that's
You want me
very
to
nice.
read it, Gary?
No, that's fine.
Thank you.
My only comment was I agree with Allison. We need rental housing. I think, and this is a big lot. It'll be interesting to say, as long as the neighbors don't come back with objections, and I think we have a win-win here. Yeah, so any further comment? Okay, I'll ask a question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Got them all? Thanks.
All hands, yep.
We're going to move on to, thank you very much, Jennifer.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
We're going to run at 7.5, which is the 2019 audited financial statements. Raj Hare, Chief Financial Officer. Go ahead, Raj.
Can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
Oh, there you go. I just had to unmute myself. I had part of the meeting you've all anxiously been awaiting.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. So our audit is now complete. We've gone over the financial statements with the audit committee. I'm just going to give you some highlights of the financial statements and what happened in 2019. In 2019, Bowen Island Municipality took on more capital project work than any other year in its history. We did the culvert replacement. Repairs were done on Mount Gardner culverts 1 and 2. We did the Cardita Road widening, which was completed. We effected repairs to water mains in Blue Water Park, and associated road repair works were done there. There was substantial progress achieved on pre-design and engineering work on the community center, the water treatment plant, and the fire hall. And all of this work, it was available through increases in grant revenue and through use of our statutory reserves. In terms of what the financial statements are telling you, the net financial position for Bowen Island Municipality improved by $1.3 million over the previous year. Those improvements are represented by an increase in our non-financial assets of $2 million. By that, I'm saying tangible capital assets, so the capital works, and increased by $2 million. And part of those were contributed asset consisting of the Malkin Creek Parkland designation. Those were offset by a decrease in financial assets, so our cash and reserves, which were used to acquire the tangible capital assets. In terms of our statement of operations, it shows that PSAB recognized revenues exceeded expenditures by 1.3 million, which was the improvement in our financial situation, as I explained earlier. And significant variances to budget essentially included, we had lower than budgeted revenue recognition of grant proceeds during the year, and that was primarily due to delays in startup of the water treatment plant. So we recognize that grant revenue as that money is being spent. So construction for the water treatment plant commenced in March of 2020 and is expected to complete in March 2021. So we'll be recognizing most of that grant revenue in 2020. And in terms of the expenses side, protective services, we had a significantly unfavorable variance to budget. We had unforeseen legal and consulting costs incurred there. There was an independent task force that was mobilized in 2019 in response to the challenges facing the volunteer fire department. In addition to that, we incurred legal costs there as well. And then on top of that, in the emergency management program, expenditures that were initially not budgeted for, but were funded through grants, included work on the Fire Smart program and other emergency operations initiatives. Water system operations also had an unfavorable variance in expenditures due to that significant leak and repair in Blue Water Park. And in terms of our sewer system operations, also had an unfavorable variance to budget due to lift station work that was budgeted for subsequently in the amended financial plan. That is, in a nutshell, is a summary of the year's events. And I will answer any questions that you may have on the financial statements. And subsequent to that, when you go to approving or moving the recommendation, I'm going to ask that we change the word accepted to approved in the recommendation. So the recommendation I had in my report was that the 2019 audited financial statements for Bowen Island Municipality be accepted by council. So in past years, and according to the community charter, council is simply required to accept the financial statements, but due to changes in auditing standards, the auditors have requested that these statements be approved by council. And there was a recommendation from the Finance Advisory Committee that council approve the financial statements as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Raj. Questions, anybody? Allison?
I've already had my kick at the Financial Advisory Committee and Raj got my 5 pages.
All right. Well, if I don't see anything out there, the recommendation is that the 2019 audited financial statement for Bowen Island Municipality be approved by council. I'll move that.
I'll move that.
Second. Thank you, Rob. And any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
Very nice. Thank you, Raj.
Thanks, Raj.
Okay, so new business. 10.1 emergency transportation service review. Councillor Hawking. Thank you, David. Cheers.
Thanks, Gary. Council members were running about an hour behind time, so I won't take a whole lot of your time. But I just want to, when something goes well, as it did with this emergency transportation, it's great to celebrate. And Gary, your letter was very much, your very kind letter was really appreciated by the members of the Transportation Society. So celebrating is great.
Thank you.
It's also useful to reflect on what went right and why it went right, to see if there's anything we can learn from that. And so that's why I sat down and wrote this report. And because I think there were three things here that were quite unique in terms of our transit relationship on Bowen. And I've got those 3 points. And one was that tremendous, fast problem-solving relationship between the EOC and the Transportation Society and the municipality. That was, you know, the EOC had great things to say about BTS. BTS had fabulous things to say about the EOC. It was just sitting down, rolling up the sleeves, figuring out how to solve a problem. The second part was that the value of having on-island experience that BTS brings. They knew the drivers, they knew everything, they knew what needed to be done. And if they didn't know, they knew to ask the EOC about it. And then finally, it was the flexibility that they had. They didn't just sort of come in with one idea of solution. They were able to sort of figure things out as we were moving forward, and that allowed things to be done really quickly and really well. So I just wanted to make sure that we captured these, and because, as I say at the end of the report, that BTS does plan to respond when TransLink puts out the contract again for next year. And I want to make sure that TransLink is aware of the strength that BTS brings to that. So that's why I wrote this report. So I'm happy to answer any questions or just have council accept this.
Thanks, David. Just a comment. I think that was an amazing response by BTS. And I think everybody came in there and did the, you know, the Bowen Island community responded, obviously. But I think it will bode extremely well for BTS if they're in a position to go for that contract from TransLink. I think TransLink was very impressed also with the work we did. There was absolutely no question to it. Talking to Mike Buddha and stuff like that, he, you know, he said you really put a good performance on Bowen Island. So that's nice to hear. And I'll go to Maureen.
Yeah, just a question, Dave. Can you remind me when the contract is coming up again?
And my understanding is the end of the year.
Yeah.
It's a renewal. I think they've had 3 years. I think the current outfit has had 3 years, but I'm not quite sure, Maureen, but it's the end of the year is my understanding.
Yeah.
And it's a competitive process.
Yes, that is how it's, well, they just put out requests for proposals. And, you know, there are not very many transit providers in our area in Metro Vancouver who respond to these things.
Thank you.
Okay, Sue Ellen.
Assuming that Councillor Hawking moved that motion, I'd like to second it.
Sure, I'll move it.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right.
It's just basically for anybody watching that council received for information the Emergency Transportation Service Review Report dated May 15th, 2020.
All right. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Okay, I'll ask a question. All in favor?
Aye.
Again. And kudos. Thank you, David.
Yep.
Thanks,
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
And okay, so now we're going to move on to 10.2, which is the updates, Metro Vancouver business. David Hawking, back to you, Dave.
Sure, back to me. Thank you, Gary. There were a couple of meetings, and what was interesting, I think, to both of them. So one was the COVID task force review. The other was the Climate Action Committee meeting. The COVID, both of them were concerned. Both of these committees, well, task force and committee, had pretty strong views about making sure that back to normal wasn't back to the old way. And the COVID task force, they were particularly concerned about vulnerable populations, particularly the folks who are homeless, and how in the COVID emergency, their recognition that, oh my goodness, how are we going to protect these people? How are we going to stop COVID from just exploding? And so they've been moved into hotels, but now what happens? And so the task force has asked Metro Vancouver staff to prepare a report that could go to the province and the federal government regarding handling in a better way after this whole thing is over are really vulnerable populations, particularly the homeless folks. Now that's a kind of a big city issue, but it also has affected Bowen, as we all know. On the climate action side, again, it was that there was a motion and that this go, and it will be going to the board this Friday, that when we're looking at the kinds of investments to come out of this crisis and to help build the economy, that they be a focus on climate change. And this is, of course, you expect this kind of thing from organizations that work on climate change, such as the Climate Action Committee, and it's come from various other organizations, but such as the Penman Institute and so on, and the various other environmental focused groups. But it's also coming out of the International Energy, the IEA, the International Energy Agency, the IMF, and so on. So there is a real focus. There's hopefully a real focus on kind of a clean energy approach. And what I'm thinking is probably most likely it will be home renovations, money for home renovations, because that's one of the areas where you get the biggest job bang for the buck, and you'll also help, reduce people's costs of heating their homes and so on. In our climate action plan, one of the things we said is that we have to be flexible. We have to look at what's happening with other jurisdictions, and I think we can probably expect something from the federal government, the provincial government, after when we're starting to look at recovery, and that's what's coming out of the Climate Action Committee right now. So those are a couple of things that I thought would be interesting to council.
Thank you, David. And just to your second point there, the mayor of Port Moody, and I just can't remember his name right now, but he's got a resolution that's going to be sent to provincial government, the federal government, and say, when we come out of this, let's start looking after our less fortunate people, our homeless and that sort of thing, and get them in the plan, the new plan that comes out. So I will, I will probably endorse that and send it on to him.
Yeah, he was
highly in favor of it.
Mayor Vagromov, and he was the one who brought it up, but it was followed up by all kinds of other mayors who say, look, we really have to deal with this. We can't just allow this to become back to the way it was before, because it's just not good enough.
Yeah, here. Yeah, thanks, David. Okay, we'll move on to where are we here? Okay, support regarding Mount Gardner Trails, Councillor Fast.
Thank you. Yes, I've put in a little report to go along with this, because at our last meeting, when we talked about Mount Gardner Trails and we voted unanimously to prohibit motorized vehicles, I mentioned Islands Trust. We talked a little bit about it, but then we didn't make any specific ask. Later, anyway, I won't go into all the detail, but you can see here there are examples of where Islands Trust has been able to help us with environmental and other kinds like municipal tax and rural grant eligibility, logging, and abandoned and derelict vessels, where they've been supporting us. And I just thought I should bring this to council, ask you folks, what do you think? Should we ask the Islands Trust for support in this? So my recommendation is the council request. It's on the page there.
All right. Now, yeah, I don't have a problem asking the Islands Trust to support it. The letter to the Tom Blackburn is we're going to wait till after the presentation from the Trail Riders Association, which is coming up in one council meeting. So the next council meeting, they have a and I think it's only fair that we listen to their position. I felt kind of badly that we jumped on this right away without hearing both sides of the story. We really only heard one side of the story. So I'd like to listen to their presentation and see where that leads us before we carry on with this.
Well, if I might just continue, this was to, request the Islands Trust to support Bowen Island Municipality in its efforts to oppose any recreational use of motorized vehicles on Mount Gardner Crown lands on Bowen Island. This is just for the record and so people can hear. I thought we might be getting a letter like a submission as we did for LNG. I thought the same kind of thing would be happening. So I was surprised not to see it in the agenda. And this is a follow-up to the decision we made last council meeting. And so I thought we could maybe deal with this one first, like we did before. If this is the, make a decision about this, and then I would be really interested in talking more about, I would like to see the letter before, or the submission before it goes to Tom Blackbird. I think council should see that. And I think because we're in a funny situation where it's all electronic and in this Mount Gardner Trails things, there seems to be a lot of either misunderstanding or people, anyway, I think everything should be as above board as possible in the public eye, daylight all over the place, whatever that word is, transparency. And so I would like it to come back to council, but I wonder if we could just deal with this one first.
I agree 100%, Sue Ellen. I'd like to see it come back to council too, and this after this presentation by the Trail Riders Association, because I think we have to see both sides of the story to make a proper decision on it. Now, having said that, the resolution that we did have in opposition did not indicate it was under my signature. So I would also like to pass a resolution to have that come back to council, that letter come back to council, so council can decide on it after the presentation of the Trail Riders Association. So what are the feelings on that? I see Allison up there.
Okay, I guess we've got Bonnie back joining us. She went to have a little rest, I guess. That was good. Sure. So my question, we asked for a bunch of information from Tom at that meeting, which I think Bonnie has now asked for, and I guess I would like to see that. And yes, I think what the mayor is suggesting is we maybe were very unfair and didn't hear both sides of the story. Right. And so I guess my question is, if we hear the other side of the story, and if we decide to ask the province to ban motorized, and if they come back and say yes, then we have no need to ask the Islands Trust for any help. So I think it's premature. I don't have a problem, if we get well, no, we're not going to think about that, then let's get some assistance. But and I'd like to see what Tom has sent to us and get to see all the information before we, keep going.
I agree with that.
Bonnie what she's been able to get?
Yeah, Tom has not got back to me yet, but I'll send him another email and just ask him for the partnership agreements. Is that what you just want the partnership agreement?
Well, there was a partnership agreement, but I think he also made some reference to some earlier agreement or earlier ruling about what's the trail that's motorized right now? It starts with an E.
Yeah, and I know he's extremely busy, so like very, very busy in his position. So I know he did say that some of the information was not that easy to obtain. So I just don't know, knowing that he can be quite overwhelmed and it can take a month or so to get a reply. from him
Yeah.
that the partnership agreements may be easier to get. Just a suggestion that would at least give you some information. And my letter, which I have finished and I submitted it to Hope, just that was my direction. So it has a lot of information with regards to our zoning, our OCP, some data from tourism. You know, there's a lot of information in the letter that I did write.
Yeah, I guess, but if the motorized trail is this old agreement that's not part of the partnership agreement, then.
Yeah,
you
the
know,
partnership agreement expired on May 15th.
Yeah.
Oh,
best of
okay.
my knowledge.
So, but this old agreement is the one that seemed to me was the trail that was being used for motorized stuff. So I wanted to see both. Because I think the old agreement's maybe the one we've got to get them to overturn.
I think
Okay,
it would be great to see the other agreement for Radar Hill that the Trail Riders also has, because they've got that that route around that. So I think there's another one also on Crown land. It would be good to see that as well.
yeah, here. David?
Yeah, thank you, Gary. So there are a whole bunch of letters, more letters on this, and I wanted to get myself up to date. So I checked back to the minutes of our April 27th meeting. And yes, we had a letter. We were asked direct staff to prepare a submission to Mr. Blackbird requesting a prohibition on motorized use on Mount Gardner. So I'm glad that we are, that your idea, Gary, is to bring that back, because I would like to see it so we can see where we are on this. And I'm happy to wait another week or 2 weeks until we do that other presentation. In terms of what Sue Ellen is asking, I see no harm in asking the Islands Trust to help on this as well. I'm quite happy to support that, but it also seems reasonable to do it all when we discuss this at the next council meeting. So I'm happy to support Sue Ellen's. I think we could do it then, but I certainly want to see the staff report and have a look at it and have a full discussion about this in our next meeting in 2 weeks.
Sure, that was my intention, was that this would come forward because we would have the draft submission.
Yeah.
And so I'm happy to defer until the same meeting as we look at the draft submission.
Thanks, Sue Ellen.
Okay, that
Okay,
sounds great. Thank you, Sue.
So it's deferred until, can I just say the meeting at which we look at the draft submission? Or do we have to give a date?
I think it would be safe to say that the letter is complete and we could have it on the June 8th council agenda. So June 8th would be.
Okay, then I'd like to defer it until June 8th. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Maureen, we have comment?
Yeah, I'm happy to defer this until we have an opportunity to see the submission. But one of the things that I'm concerned about, just some flags raised for me in the early part of this conversation. There's always a tendency to want to hear both sides of an issue. And sometimes you think that they are equal sides in the issue and you want to give their space. I think that it's really important to recognize that we have been inundated with letters from the public in opposition to motorized travel on Mount Gardner. And while I can appreciate that the trail riders want to make a presentation to council, and I certainly recognize the contribution they've made in the past, it doesn't really budge me from the basic position of opposition to motorized travel on the on Mount Gardner. So I mean, from a sort of logical point of view, I don't want us to get suckered into thinking that there are two equal sides here whose arguments have equal weight. There is a very large proportion of the Bowen population that simply does not want this to happen. And prohibition is exactly what they're looking for us to support.
I understand that. There's no question, Maureen, and a point well taken. There's no question, but let's just see how things shake down in a couple of weeks. But I take your point. Anybody else on that one?
Yes,
go ahead, Michael. Yeah.
If I may, Gary, because I think we all know where we stand on the issue. The only question I pose in terms of the trail riders is that we all know from our first lessons when we join council that we are meant to come to council with an open mind and, as far as possible, balance things out evenly. I just wonder what the correct procedure is if someone comes in front of us to make a presentation and basically minds are made up. I'm not asking for a reply for that now, but to me that does pose a dilemma. You're asking people to come in good faith and address us. And yet, really, we know perfectly well that their side of the argument is has probably already been taken into account, and so on and so on. So I'm not sure where that leaves us, but I am slightly uncomfortable asking or accepting someone to come in front of us under those circumstances, at least if they don't know the full picture. So I'm not, maybe we could ask Hope or someone to take this forward, because I don't like these people coming, expecting a fair hearing, knowing fully well our stance on the subject. There is something fundamentally wrong with that, and I ask that someone looks into it, because Gary, I take your point. We are meant to be even-handed and address these issues equally. So it is a bit of a dilemma.
I agree with you 100%, Michael, and I'm certainly not backing off our position, but maybe there'll be some middle ground. Maybe there's some way to make that work that we haven't considered, and that would be the only way looking forward. Hope?
Would it be useful to let the delegation know how many letters of opposition we've received, so they just know what they're up against? Because at this time, no one really knows but council. They were sent directly to mayor and council. They will be included in the agenda package, but just so they're aware of this letter writing campaign that is going on, might change their mind, or might just they'll just know what's going on.
But
yeah,
I think we should treat them like anybody else, right? They look at the agenda, they see the information.
Yeah, I think so too.
I'm not sure why they have, well, that's all.
Since we've heard this, can we just sort of take all these comments under advisement? Being as it's now 9:15.
Yeah,
I just wanted to let you,
what time it is.
before Tom Blackbird came to Mr.
I'd like to hear what Bonnie has to say. Can I hear what Bonnie says?
Bonnie?
Before Tom Blackbird was coming as a delegation, I phoned all three parties and spoke with their spokespeople to let them know that Tom Blackbird was coming and council was going to listen to the issue or raise concerns at that time and perhaps identify issues. So all three groups knew that the issue was coming to council before Tom Blackbird came.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, no, it's a good point. They could have come up at the beginning. Yeah. Yeah, I don't feel like making a decision on this at this time of night.
The motion is currently to defer.
Well, I know we're just going to defer 10.3, and I'm more considering the fact that the delegation come. I think they're scheduled to come. I think we should let them come, and make our decision after that. That's all I can think of. But it's going to take a little bit more thinking. That's all there is to it, unless somebody's got a really good idea. I agree with your point, Michael, that we can't. It's almost like a done deal, really, unless they can come up with something strategic or move them to a different part of the island or something like that. That's the only thing that I'm thinking might come out of this.
Can we just think about it overnight? I mean, this is something that the meeting's not for 2 weeks, and
yeah, no, absolutely.
Tell them there's a huge pile of letters, and they may decide not to come. But I think it is an open. They have the right to come and address council.
I agree, 100%. 100%, I agree. Anyway, we're going to we've deferred that. We're going to move on to 10.4.
I'll just need a motion to defer that, or move it or a second.
I move that we defer the recommendation in 10.3 to the June 8th council meeting to be considered with the submission, with the draft submission from staff.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to ask a question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We good, Hope?
We're good. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, update Island Trust business. Island Trust Municipal Trustees Fast and Kale. Be conscious of time, please.
Okay, look at agenda items 12.3 in your package. I just wanted to let you know, electronic meetings and public hearings and around the Islands Trust. Reminder to avoid non-essential travel. So that's region-wide from our partner, the Islands Trust. There's a letter there I thought you'd like to see about the investigation of a freighter collision. This is something that the Islands Trust is asking Federal Minister Garneau to launch an investigation. These are freighters that tangled their anchors, and there could have been a very bad spill. And as it was, there's damage to the seafloor and to the habitat of the southern resident killer whale. And the last one is just anybody's welcome to join Islands Trust Council at our next meeting in June, which will also be a meeting. So anybody who in the whole Islands Trust area, it's easier for people to participate if they wish to come in for some parts of it or another. That's my report.
All right, thank you, Sue Ellen. And
Okay.
10.5, Metro Regional Parks Committee meetings.
Can we just finish off the Islands Trust,
Oh,
Gary?
I'm sorry, Michael. Yeah.
As I have received from their CAO the summary of benefits to Bowen Island for inclusion in the Islands Trust, which everyone has got. I will take a little longer having a look at that and report back. There is just one thing that affects Bowen and the Islands Trust, is that that is the change in tourism patterns this summer, which certainly affects Islands Trust and certainly affects Bowen Island. And believe it or not, when you sit here in the middle of May saying we are still quizzing just where this summer is going, that is most unusual. But when one looks at the inbound and outbound figures and the rapidly changing or solidifying of information around airlines, the one things that we will have to do, and I will certainly work with Islands Trust on this and with Tourism Bowen, is just look at some of the potential numbers Bowen Island and the Gulf Islands may be, and I say maybe, receiving this summer. I think we'll have a better idea in another 2 weeks, but just to say be prepared, because the outbound segment is almost terminated. I'm sure everybody recognizes people are not going to be flying off to here, there, and everywhere. On the other hand, the inbound segment are also quarterized because they won't be coming in either. So you have a swirling pool of BC residents going to go somewhere. And we need to try and get a little bit of a handle on this so we can be to some extent prepared, just in case we are likely to get a massive visitor influx. And it's not just Bowen, it is the rest of the Gulf Islands as well, Whistler and the Sunshine Coast, because it could be a bit of a game changer. And as we get into the next couple of weeks, please let's be prepared to give that some thought, because we may, just may, and I don't like this scenario, be having to deal with an overwhelming amount of visitors for no other reason than circumstances which we all understand. So please, if we could just start to give that some thought, and Sue Ellen, perhaps maybe we could chat offline on the implications for the other islands in the trust, because this is a potential tsunami and could be very real.
We'll have
thank you very much, Michael.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Now we're going to move on. 10.5 Metro Vancouver Regional Parks. Councillor Nicholson.
Thanks, Gary.
Yeah.
We have not met in the last couple of weeks. We'll meet again in about 2 weeks' time. And I have moved from the being able to announce the acquisition of Dorman Park to negotiating shared costs on a porta potty at the entry to Griffin Park. So I'm looking for some money.
Good for you.
Mhm.
A real upgrade.
Yeah,
Okay.
offline
Maybe-
conversation. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
it.
we'll go to Translate Mayor's Council meetings. Allison.
We are meeting on Thursday morning, and I was quickly looking through my 10,000 emails, trying to find the one that had the draft agenda in it, and I can't. But we'll find out more about plans and what's for going forward with having transit available for people to get to work and the COVID-19 response. That's the major agenda item.
Okay. Thank you. And we are going to move to a closed meeting. And the recommendation is a council move to a closed meeting immediately following the regular council meeting to discuss items pursuant to section 90-1E, I, and K of the community charter. I'll move that. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. And all in favor? Aye.
All right.
Thank you. Is that good, Hope?
That's good, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we've covered section 11 and we go right down to the bottom here and it's question period.
I'm going to
Does
get a glass
anybody
of
have a
water.
question out there? Going once, going twice.
Natasha Vaz has her hand up. Mayor Andrew.
Hello, Natasha.
Hello, everyone. Sorry, I just want to take 2 seconds to
Yeah.
apologize to everyone. My hand was kind of left up from Sat Pander's presentation. And I just had a little bit more questions for them about their future plans and how it could involve the community. And also possibly some questions for Daniel, but I guess he's not here. And so I just guess my question would be, would there be a chance to hear what he has to say in regards to that at some future date?
Yeah, you could certainly phone him and ask him.
Okay. All right. Well,
Natasha, Daniel will be at the next council meeting on June 8th, and he'll be presenting the application at that time. So you can tune back in then.
okay, great. I will definitely be there, and have a great meeting, everyone. And sorry for that little disruption.
No, not at all. Nice to hear from you, Natasha.
Take care. Nice to virtually see your faces.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
And on that note, we will adjourn the regular council meeting. And do people need any time, or can we just move into this? I think this is going to be quite a quick agenda on the closed. Is everybody happy with that?
We have to leave this one and log back in, right? So we need a few minutes to do that.
Okay, you want to take 5 minutes?
Get a glass of water.
Okay, 9:30. Let's come back.
See you shortly.
Okay, bye-bye.